Interestingly, I had no desire to go home with them. I had become a responsible adult and was truly happy living with my husband. It was quite apparent that Andrew and I embraced being married in a wholesome manner. We got along extremely well. We took time to discuss matters and always made decisions together. Both of us were good conversationalists. We were totally immersed in each facet of our daily routines. Most of all, we respected and admired each other. It was the casual Saturday we needed. We planned to do absolutely nothing but relax. We used the time to recharge our batteries. At sundown, we decided to shower together. That was so much fun until we were enticed to continue our frivolity in bed. The mood was just right. Our thoughts were in sync. Christmas was just around the corner, and our schedules were packed. We were invited to several holiday events and parties, but excused from some because of the decision to take our honeymoon beginning Christmas Day, Wednesday, December 25th, 1968, through New Year's Day, Wednesday, January 1st, 1969. Our notoriety was astonishing. I was most surprised to receive invitations from several sororities and fraternities. Yet Andrew nor I had any affiliation with them at all, leading me to the conclusion the residents of Erie were very friendly. After all, we were a new young couple who had begun our lives there with a bang. We put a large wreath on the front door and placed 2 poinsettias in the living room. I felt we would have plenty time to build a wealth of Christmas decorations in the forthcoming years. Andrew informed me about a new vacation concept rooted in Europe, but in its infancy in the USA, called timeshares. He said if we chose Niagara Falls as our honeymoon destination, we could be a test couple and get a price reduction for the week. It only worked if we stayed a week or more in one of the condominiums targeted for the idea. The notion of a condominium was also a rather new residential approach. In essence, we would buy a week for a certain amount of years. We could use the week anytime or allow someone else to use it for a nominal charge, paid to us. The savings seemed worth it. Furthermore, we could also use it as a getaway during the summer or fall. I liked the idea of being part of an experiment that saved us money, especially in Niagara Falls. I encouraged him to seal the deal, and he did. Christmas morning, we took the slower scenic routes 20 and 5 into Buffalo, then on to Niagara Falls, New York, taking about 2 hours and 15 minutes. The attractive new condominium had many amenities. There were Christmas lights around the structure. Christmas music could be heard through big speakers strategically placed along the walkway. The condo provided us with the comforts of home. It was nice not being pressured to do something at a particular time. We were free-spirited, unencumbered lovebirds, total able to enjoy each other's company. Niagara Falls turned out to be the best choice all around. Many Americans went to the Canadian side because it had more things to do, but we've preferred the American side. Factually speaking, The view of the Canadian Falls from the American side dazzled us. By contrast, the view of the American side must have disappointed many because it was in the beginning stages of a much-needed redo. The plans were for 6 months in 1969. Niagara's American Falls would be dewatered. They planned to clean the river and stabilize the land due to erosion. They had already built a temporary walkway only 20 feet from the edge of the anticipated dry falls that would allow tourists to explore the otherwise inaccessible landscape. Nevertheless, the adventures of Niagara Falls were not hampered by the aforementioned. One of the best thrills, including riding the River Mist boat that cruised the water below the falls. Luckily, the weather cooperated by giving us fairly mild temperatures in December. The sights at night were stunning. We took numerous pictures. During that week, a few restaurants featured Broadway-type shows in a package deal. We took advantage of every deal available. In addition, we were given honeymoon rates for other activities. All in all, we had a marvelous time, a truly perfect honeymoon, and an ideal way to begin 1969. As we were leaving January 1st, we greeted everyone with a cheerful Happy New Year. 2 days after we returned home, I received a call from a representative from the People's Opera Company in Providence, Rhode Island, asking if I would consider singing the lead role, Madame Flora, in Giancarlo Menotti's The Medium. The plot concerns Baba, who as Madame Flora conducts bogus seances with her daughter, Monica, and a gypsy deaf-mute named Toby to extract money from bereaved parents. The staged opera is about an hour long, and both acts take place in Baba's apartment. The lady said I would be paid plus flown out there, housed and fed, the week of February 22nd. She apologized for getting in touch with me so late, but the grant for the opera was only finalized December 28th. They had me in mind all along, but could not make a move until everything was settled. I understood their predicament and was honored to be chosen for the role. I would have only 6 weeks to learn the part, but I knew I could do it. Therefore, I said yes and asked them to send the score express mail. She told me the score and my contract would be sent immediately. My new voice position at the college and the radio station gave me fuel to tackle the challenge ahead. I'd have to pre-record some radio shows and do make-up voice lessons after the performance. As I went about dealing with everything on my plate, I occasionally felt unsteady or queasy. Since I needed a primary doctor, I chose Dr. Russell Farnsworth, who had given Andrew his physical. He knew about my robust musical schedule and wanted to make sure I was healthy enough to meet the demands of my profession. In 3 days, his office received the full lab report. His secretary called and gleefully told me I was pregnant. She said I should be just fine to sing in the opera, since I would be only 3 months along. I couldn't get over it. I was going to have a baby. Oh! When Andrew got home that evening, I ushered him into the living room. He wondered what was going on with me. I took both his hands, looked deep into his eyes, and told him he would become a father in August. He looked baffled and asked if that meant I was pregnant. I laughed and said, "Yes, my darling, I am with child." His eyes were big as saucers. He smiled from ear to ear while looking at me adoringly and said, "Our love is giving us the most precious gift." His excitement made him call our folks to give them the good news. Mama answered the phone and heard an almost out-of-control Andrew telling her I was pregnant and she would be a grandmother the coming summer. Mama was overjoyed and told us our lives were on the path to God's glory. Next, of course, he called Philip. He told him he would be an uncle, and our children could play together. Then he called Waylon to tell him the news. He congratulated me and said he could not get over his little sister about to become a mother. He added, "Andrew will be a fine father." That night in our giant bed, Andrew made sure I carefully sprawled over him and was attentive to my every word and every move. In a few months, I would not be able to take my preferred sleeping position with him, for my belly would be too big. I wondered how I would adjust to being pregnant in the later months. I guess I'd get accustomed to it all and be just fine. The next few weeks were devoted to learning the opera role and giving my new voice students a solid foundation upon which they could build their vocal technique. The array of students were intelligent and seemed to soak up every word I uttered concerning the mechanics of singing. My most promising student was a lyric tenor named Arturo Clementi. His smooth, soothing sound tended to make listeners swoon. He never pushed his voice and relied on a good frontal focus and breathing proficiency. Because he was slightly older than the majority of my students and had some experience, he devoured high-level repertoire, including the lovely solo Agnus Dei from Benjamin Britten's War Requiem. As I learned the often modal music for the opera, I immersed myself in the spooky, hard-hearted, confused, brooding, and somewhat insane character. The part requires first-rate acting. I remembered this opera catapulted Dr. Zelma George into becoming the first black woman to sing the role on Broadway in 1950. I was following the footsteps of a legend. Before long, I was in Providence, rehearsing and learning the staging for the medium. The all-black cast showed it could portray the characters and to sing the music superbly. Perhaps the secret to my success has to do with doing many things at once, for I cruised unhampered in the rehearsals. Therefore, the deliverance of the operatic role was, as they say, on the money. It was quite an accomplishment in a relatively short period of time. The newspaper music reviewer gushed over my performance. Needless to say, I cherished that review. Luckily, I did not show my pregnancy much at all, for no one noticed or commented. Only the costume designer knew and cleverly made my garments to de-emphasize my midsection. I was tired when I returned, but had little time to recover. For my radio program, I featured the opera The Medium and shared my experience preparing and performing the lead role. That further endeared me to my listening audience, for they knew I was for real. The station director told me the ratings were very high. Thus, personalizing the show became an occasional and very successful feature. Interestingly, that opera opened the door for me to share more information about opera libretti and the correlation between the story and the way the composers chose certain sounds to represent aspects of an opera. I had no idea the paranormal world would stir up such intense fascination for opera and classical music in general. I dare say, perhaps, college music appreciation classes should choose works with definite themes which captivate the imagination of the listener and beckon them to look deeper inside a particular work, then investigate their particulars from many angles. I was in my 7th month by the end of the semester, and bushed. I managed to keep up the radio program until the 3rd week of August. Then the pregnancy took control. My legs and feet were swollen. I had morning sickness and became lethargic. As a temporary substitute, the radio station used the American Enlightening series classical music section recordings about the most popular classical music of all time. That way, the station did not have to hire anyone temporarily. Somebody already a part of the station simply played the vinyl recording for an hour. Always before and after that program, WECS announced I was on maternity leave and expected to return hosting Hyped on Classical Music in October. Late August wore me down thoroughly. I was especially hot. My belly was really big, and I had difficulty walking. Therefore, I moved as little as possible. Andrew catered to my every need and understood my moodiness. A bit after midnight, Sunday, August 31st, 1969, I awakened Andrew and told him to drive me to the hospital because I was experiencing contractions. We packed my things in early August to be ready for this moment. He was nervous but efficient. When we reached the hospital, they rushed me away very quickly because I was set to deliver the baby. I had the overwhelming urge to bear down, and I was given the go-ahead to push. The stories I heard about lengthy labor did not apply to me. After a relatively short time and expected pain, my baby came into the world at 2:57 a.m. It was an 8-pound, 5-ounce, healthy baby boy. Whatever else went on during the process of delivering the baby, I cannot remember. However, I vividly remember holding my new son and remarking how small he was. The attending nurse informed me he was considered a fairly large newborn. I guess I just didn't know what to expect because I had never seen a newborn baby. As I held the infant, I felt an overwhelming love for this little bundle of joy. Someone told me Andrew had been nervously pacing in the waiting room and came bolting through the door to see me and the baby as soon as they allowed him inside the glass viewing area. When they told him he had a son, he cried unashamedly and blew me a kiss. He asked them to carry our son close to the window so he could see him. He seemed flabbergasted at the marvel of birth and beamed with pride. After the allotted time in the hospital, Andrew drove the baby and me home. It became a monumental day. Everything changed. We focused our attention on our son, whom we named Andrew Jonas Porter, and immediately called him AJ. He was cute, attentive, friendly, smiled a lot, and enjoyed cooing. In fact, AJ giggled whenever anyone stood over his crib. He liked people and tried to communicate as best he could. I imagined my husband looked and acted very much the same way when he was a baby. Since I learned to breastfeed the baby in the hospital, I felt comfortable nursing him at home. Andrew bought lots of baby food and got a kick out of feeding AJ. We put the crib in our bedroom to be close to him at night. I was surprised how well and fast Andrew changed AJ's diapers. The stinkies didn't faze him. He said that was part of life. Frankly, it didn't bother me either. Andrew and I were well-adjusted parents. There was never a dull moment in the Porter household. AJ kept me busy. In all honesty, I liked being busy with my son and husband. I tended to AJ during the day, and Andrew took over when he came home from the clinic. It was a hoot watching my fellas play each day. My parents were anxious to see their grandson and asked if they could stay the weekend with us when AJ was 1 month old. Naturally, Andrew and I wanted them to come and welcomed their visit. They were so proud of AJ until I thought they would burst. AJ giggled and spoke baby talk to them constantly. They had a fine time bonding. Andrew took many pictures in order to remember these special moments. We asked them to spend the entire Thanksgiving holiday with us in order to continue the bonding process. They instantly said they would. Our household bubbled with love. AJ was developing nicely. He began forming real words at 6 weeks. Much to my total delight, Mama was his first word. Andrew hired a sweet middle-aged lady named Mrs. Atkins to take care of the baby so I could return to the radio program and my college music faculty position Wednesday, October 1st. She had raised her own 3 children alone because her husband passed nearly 2 years after her last child was born. This lady was a hard-working woman determined to provide for her family. I was so happy Andrew found her because I definitely wanted to help her succeed. Daddy was also in the spotlight because his birthday is October 2nd. Andrew sent pictures of the baby inside the birthday card we sent him. He proudly carried on non-stop about the pictures when we called to wish him a happy birthday. He loved being a grandfather. Philip, Ursula, and little Phil visited us in late October. They were happy to meet the new member of our family. Ursula commented on how much the baby looked like Andrew. Little Phil seemed to wonder why AJ was so small. He stared at him and grabbed at one of AJ's fingers. AJ firmly gripped the finger and seemed to really like little Phil, now 2 years old. The wonderment continued a few minutes until Ursula took little Phil away from AJ, preventing him from becoming too rambunctious. The 4 of us realized we had witnessed a special sort of toddler-to-baby recognition. As odd as it may have been, I believe they reached out to each other and perhaps became forever linked, somewhat like the moment Andrew and Philip discovered each other at the orphanage. They joined hands and became fraternally tied together. Philip informed us they would be in the New York City Thanksgiving Day parade due to his school's marching band being chosen to march in that big parade. It was an honor seldom extended to prep schools, but under Philip's leadership, the marching band had become somewhat of a phenomenon. Philip formed the marching band to generate more interest in music, and it worked marvelously. The students had to participate in the concert band or chamber orchestra to qualify for the marching band. It helped tremendously had the football team called the Snowmen win the prep school regional championship title the semester before he arrived. That championship jump-started the need for a marching band. Philip's first marching band camp generated tons of excitement and sufficiently prepared his young students for the rigors associated with marching band routines and formations. The Alumni Association provided cute snowmen uniforms for the band. We planned to get together again at our house sometime during the Christmas holidays for merriment and music, spotlighting my wonderful new grand piano. Our sons will learn to digest the festivities and glorious sounds as we initiate holiday traditions with our families. Mama called and told me she would cook Thanksgiving dinner at our house instead of bringing the meal as she did last year. Therefore, she gave me a grocery list. She and Daddy planned to arrive Wednesday afternoon in order to have plenty time to do all she had to do. Andrew cheered when he heard they would spend 4 nights with us. He knew he would eat magnificent meals and watch our folks spoil AJ. My darling husband took great pleasure in every aspect of our family. Those 4 days were absolutely magnificent. Everyone was extra pumped because we would watch the Thanksgiving Day parade from New York City with hopes of seeing Philip's band marching. Our eyes were glued to the TV. After only 27 minutes into the parade, we heard one of the TV personalities comment on the cute snowmen uniforms worn by the Braxton Academy Marching Band. The commentator continued by saying Braxton was an Ohio prep school near Cleveland and was only the second prep school band to be invited to the parade. In Nothing Flat, the snowmen were marching down the street. Philip had learned to walk backwards in order to direct the band. He did a great job and also wore a uniform. The band had a full sound, in spite of having only 47 players. Philip certainly had the ability to bring out the most from his students. His choice of music and his arrangements allowed the band to shine. They kept in good formation as well. We were impressed and immensely proud of Philip. Seeing Mommy and Daddy as grandparents to my son was mind-blowing. Seeing Andrew being a father and orchestrating things around the house was eye-opening as well. I, being a natural leader, assumed the position of mother hen. It pleased our folks watching us parenting and catering to their needs. AJ loved the attention they gave him, too. Since my parents wanted to attend service at Guardian Angel AAMU Church in Erie and returned to Youngstown from there, Andrew showed Daddy the way to the church from our house on Saturday afternoon. While they were gone, Mommy and I had a singing fest with my new grand piano. She remembered enthusiastically about the outstanding tone quality of that piano label, and my piano lived up to everything she'd heard. Suddenly, we both had a similar idea. We should become a duo and give duet recitals. How great that would be to feature a mother-daughter unit. As with the classical piano world, few pianists aspire to become duo pianists, and even fewer singers make names for themselves in duo teams. I told Mama I'd investigate duet material for 2 sopranos to see if there was sufficient repertoire to establish such a combo. If I found enough music, we should be able to learn and digest it and be ready to perform by the fall of 1970. That would be stupendous. The more we sang together, the more convinced we became to try and establish a vocal partnership. The warm quality of our voices blended so well until our sounds were practically indistinguishable. AJ must have enjoyed listening to us because he was very quiet while we sang. However, when we stopped, he made loud noises, flailed his arms, and kicked his legs, seemingly insisting we continue. Mama said babies, little children, animals, and even houseplants are prized audiences because their reactions are genuine. Houseplants show their appreciation by staying healthy much longer than normal. I sang to AJ his first day home, so he was acclimated to the sound of my singing and speaking voice. Now his grandmother's singing and speaking voice is added to his collection of favorable musical sounds. There were not enough hours in the day for me to do all I had to do. Being a wife, mother, radio personality, college faculty member, and music researcher left almost no personal time. I juggled everything fairly well, though. I managed better with a super busy lifestyle than I would as a lady of leisure. Andrew's career kept his nose to the grind, too. He became highly regarded and admired. Our weekends were precious to us. Naturally, we spent quality time with the baby, but we also took time to be together whenever AJ napped. Some of that special time found us napping as well. Christmas time arrived quickly. Since we had to stay home, Andrew brought some decorations to adorn our house. He even bought a small Christmas tree. The previous year, we took our honeymoon beginning on Christmas Day through New Year's Day, and we did not know the traditions of the neighborhood. This year we found out in the neck of the woods, folks made an effort to network and mingle with each other. Generally, during the Christmas season, the neighbors scheduled a Yuletide progressive dinner. This year it would be earlier than normal because several families were not available during the holiday week. We were asked if our house could be the wine house during the annual progressive dinner evening. Because we were new and had a baby, folks would bring wine. The visit would allow us to get to know the families around the area. The street block representative promised to make us plates from the dinner with a note saying who made what dish. I liked the whole idea of promoting the community. No one could be considered an outsider. Saturday, December 20th, the evening of the event, was quite exhilarating. About 7 p.m., people showed up with smiles on their faces. Many exclaimed joy in knowing their celebrity neighbors. I assured them we were just folks like everyone else. However, when they gathered around my piano and heard me play a variety of Christmas carols and other holiday music, they disagreed with me. One man told me to just accept being a VIP. AJ was the real center of attraction, and he giggled up a storm. A few folks brought him toys and watched him swat at them and or observe them. Although the party atmosphere was in full gear, 8:30 p.m. was AJ's bedtime. Therefore, they thanked us for allowing them to gather at our home and politely departed. I was happy to have met so many nice people, and as they were leaving, thanked them for their reception and esprit de corps. After putting AJ in bed, Andrew and I sat together in the living room, watching the wood chips burn in the fireplace. we were off to a good start for the holidays. Late Christmas afternoon, Philip, Ursula, and Little Phil came to celebrate with us. Ursula had baked gingerbread cookies for an in-between snack and bought apples, oranges, grapes, and mixed nuts to have as a snack. We had fun together playing games. The favorite one was Ursula's board game, Christmas Trip, a whimsical version of the holiday whereby people chose presents according to the card they picked, as they tried to be the first to reach Santa Claus at the North Pole. Each present is assigned a certain amount of points, which enables one to move closer to the North Pole. The catch is the player must also answer a question located in a pile of random questions in a bag. Then the player pulls an answer from the pile of random answers in the box. That answer allows the player to advance by letting the player use all or half the points accumulated. Therefore, a player with a lot of points might get slowed down, while a player with fewer points steadily moves ahead. On the other hand, a player with many points could reach the destination rapidly by pulling the right answers. It definitely hinges on the luck of the draw. The questions and answers can be nonsensical or absurd, but nevertheless critical to the progress of the player. While playing there are plenty opportunities for unbridled laughter. As we played, Philip became the first to reach the North Pole, jumping past me by only a few points. He had amassed an unusual array of gifts, including a child's potty, kitchen curtains, and a wheelbarrow. Little Phil amused himself with a toy called building blocks. He sat on the floor and stacked blocks in formations that did not fall down easily. He also built interesting creations that appeared to be garages or storage units. In addition, he formed the small pieces into little cars and put them into the garage-like structures. We decided not to emphasize gift giving for our kids, but instead emphasize the importance of our families getting together. Baby AJ sat on my lap, soaked up everything, and surprisingly laughed when things were funny. His reactions made me think babies understand more than we think. I could tell he wanted to play with Little Phil, but instinctively knew he could not. Consequently, he made himself comfortable watching all the action around him. Early Christmas morning, Andrew and Ursula were busy in the kitchen preparing Christmas dinner. After a breakfast of cold cereal and milk, toast, juice, and coffee, Philip and I took the boys out in the backyard, where Little Phil was enthralled, trying to catch the mini plastic football his father tossed to him. Luckily, there was only a dusting of snow on the ground. However, it was a bit nippy. Needless to say, the boys were bundled up in their snowsuits and boots and did not mind the chill in the air. AJ enjoyed bobbling and insisted I take him out of the stroller. I complied with his wish, but watched him closely. He tried to walk, but stumbled and landed on his backside, right at my feet. I think he really wanted to join Little Phil in catching the tiny football. Just before coming inside, Little Phil let AJ hold the football. AJ patted it and unsuccessfully tried to throw it. Again, I saw how they were bonding, even though my son was a baby. Philip said, "Before you know it, our sons will be playing high school football." I told him I hoped AJ would be attracted to something less violent. Philip confessed he hoped Little Phil would play in the band. Our folks called to wish us happy holidays. Waylon and his family were with them, so there was merriment everywhere. They gathered around the phone and shouted Merry Christmas to you, and we shouted Merry Christmas to them. Our exuberance frightened the baby, and he cried. Ursula quickly picked up AJ, rocked him while telling him, with her baby voice, "Everything's all right." When he noticed her smiling at him, he immediately stopped crying and flashed her a big smile. He had never heard so much noise in his life and did not know what to make of it. Ursula plucked a children's book from her handbag and began reading to AJ. He really liked that and became captivated by the story. Little Phil listened and also liked the story. She knew how popular Little Tyke's story time had become at her library and successfully used that strategy to address this situation. Since the boys were under control, Philip and I went to the piano and began discussing his musical life beyond the prep school. He now played with a highly regarded woodwind quintet called Neo, which requires him to keep up his chops and learn new music. Northeast Ohio, which in Neo means, is rich with so much fine music and first-rate musicians until Philip easily found his niche. He absolutely loved the area. He also loved being a husband, father, uncle, and true friend. Philip thought it was remarkable how the bond between the four of us continued to grow. I added, "It shall always be strong," and hugged him. Andrew was back in the kitchen making sure everything was just right. Ursula tipped out of the reading nook and joined Andrew as he finalized the meal. She told him the boys were taking a nap. Then Ursula and Andrew joined us at the piano and recognized how similar the moment felt to the time we spent at the college in the Berkshires. I said, "Except now we were parents." Andrew announced dinner was ready. He said, "We are having wild mushroom goulash, a dish he had recently discovered, made with onions, peppers, mashed garlic, tomatoes, potatoes, zucchini, mixed with breadcrumbs, peas, rice croquette, baked sweet potatoes, dinner rolls, plum pudding, and Roman punch." The pitter-patter of little feet along with soft whines could be heard approaching the dining room. The aroma of food had awakened little Phil. He wanted to eat with us. Philip put him in his kiddie chair, and he was a happy child. I looked in on the baby. He was still asleep, so I returned to the dining room. Andrew had developed into a very good cook. His dinner was absolutely wonderful. However, he credited Mama for his recent culinary skills. Evidently, she is an excellent cooking teacher. As always, I did not benefit from her skills, for I still could not cook. Nevertheless, I continued to be the best dishwasher on earth. Shortly after we began eating, I heard babbling sounds. AJ was awake. I went to the reading nook and brought him into the dining room. He yawned, looked around, and giggled when he spotted little Phil. Andrew brought in AJ's baby food, and I fed him. I had stopped nursing the baby, so he was getting used to bottled milk. Little Phil continued to be fascinated with baby AJ. I think he still wondered why AJ was so small. I whispered to him, "Both of you will grow up in a few years, and you won't remember being babies or toddlers like you are right now." After dinner, we sang Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman for little Phil. He really liked those two songs. Of course, Ursula had books with pictures of Rudolph and Frosty, so little Phil would recognize about whom we were singing. The responsibilities of parenting never end. Everything we do and say is being recorded and stored in our children's brains. The Myers family left Friday morning with fond memories of our first Christmas together. Andrew and I enjoyed the weekend together watching TV and doing nothing of any significance. Baby AJ wondered where his playmate was, but after a while realized little Phil was no longer in the house. He rapidly became satisfied having his parents cater to his every need. Frankly, it was a very relaxing weekend for us. Although I had the upcoming week off, Andrew had to be back at his job on Monday, so the free time at home allowed him to unwind completely. That next week afforded me the opportunity to be a wife and mother full time. My baby and I had a good time playing together. He wanted me to sing to him so often until I had to figure out a way to distract him or trick him into doing something I would not play, so I couldn't play the piano. That, of course, involved a delicate balance because I also needed to practice regularly. The following weekend, Andrew and I finally played some table tennis on the first-rate table in our basement. I surprised him by playing pretty well, although I was nervous and a bit rusty. Needless to say, I was an amateur and he was a seasoned professional champion. He praised my basic technical skills and said, like music, I needed to practice certain shots to perfect them and also put them into my muscle memory. Instead of being competitive, I knew it would be in my best interest to allow my talented husband to instruct me in the subtle aspects of this sport. His patience was amazing. He preached repetition forms a good player's reputation. I positioned our son to be able to see us. He watched in total amazement, not quite knowing what to make of the sporting activity in which his parents were engaged. We brought in 1970 rather quietly in prayer. The baby was asleep, so we raised our glasses of creme de menthe and toasted the new year. Somehow I knew this new decade would bring challenges in beneficial ways. I immediately started searching for duet music, which Mama and I could learn in order to begin our journey as the LanYe sopranos. I inquired about this repertoire in the music library of the nearby university and checked the holdings of the music store in town. They both came up with quite a few collections of duets from which I could pick my desired repertoire. Since we would most likely sing in churches and colleges, I chose some familiar pieces: O Divine Redeemer, The Lord is My Light, Panis Angelicus, O Holy Night, Beautiful Night, Bella Nuit, the Tutti Fior from Madame Butterfly, the duo from the opera, the flower duet from the opera LanYe, Laudamus Te by Vivaldi, I Waited for the Lord by Felix Mendelssohn, and Ride on King Jesus, my arrangement. We also chose selected hymns and carols depending on the season or specific occasion. That repertoire will keep us busy perfecting it in time for the fall of this year. The selections are blockbusters. Although my college voice students and the radio show required lots of work, my devotion to my husband and child reigned supreme. Now with the addition of the LanYe sopranos, I had no extra time. I suppose that is just the way life goes as we move along our chosen paths. Luckily, since I had access to recordings at the radio station and at the college, I was able to make reel-to-reel tapes of all the music for the duo. I purchased the music and sent it with the tapes to Mama. She called me when she received the package and told me it would be quite a challenge for her to learn the music and let it sort of marinate into her brain. I suggested she not approach it as a chore, but as fun. I told her to listen for a while. Then, after digesting the music for pleasure, begin singing along casually. It will have drifted into her mind and taken hold. I cautioned her, however, to not get too tied to the recordings because we will put our own spin to the selections. We won't be copycats. She asked if she could come by to rehearse during my spring break. I said, absolutely. Beginnings can be the most difficult in any project. So she has looked it square in the face and officially started the process. By March, my birthday came and left rather unceremoniously. However, Andrew did bake a delicious lemon cake with lemon icing and fed it to me like I was a baby. This was fun and also kind of funny since we had a real baby watching our antics. Baby AJ thought we were hilarious because he laughed as we played around. Naturally, I also received a wonderful birthday card from my folks, and Ursula called to wish me a happy birthday. Before long, Easter had arrived, packaged in a March 29 snowstorm, making Easter look like Christmas. It was so bad until several churches canceled Easter service in favor of keeping parishioners safe. The TV and radio stations were on emergency alert, plus informing worshipers of closed churches. Andrew, the baby, and I stayed home and enjoyed being together. Daddy called to make sure we were all right. I told him we were snug as a bug in the rug and looking forward to the Easter dinner Andrew was preparing. They also had snow, but not enough to affect their Easter festivities. 2 weeks later, spring break began. The weather was splendid, allowing Daddy to drive Mama to our house to spend a few days working on our music. Unfortunately, Daddy had to go right back to meet his obligations at the mill. We wasted no time tackling the music. The baby seemed pleased to listen to us make our first run at singing the fine duo music. Mama had to concentrate on the music and her vocal technique. I gave her some vocal exercises to strengthen her breathing. She knew the music required her to sing in a tessitura quite different from singing in the church choir. Hearing the harmony also challenged her. Nevertheless, I was confident she could do it. It was incredible watching Mama work so diligently. Her serious demeanor told me she wanted this venture to be successful. Those few days allowed us to get a firm grip on the repertoire. We were more determined than ever to see this through. She tackled each piece with more and more understanding about the music. Mama went back to Youngstown armed with musical ammunition. For one of my radio shows, I highlighted famous arias from several musical categories. It was fun hearing famous singers becoming duos with other famous singers. But as far as I could determine, there had never been a mother-daughter duo. As the school year was winding down, I was revved up and looking forward to polishing the duo music. The reality of my situation was rather stunning. I had turned the page to a new chapter of my voice career, and it could not have been more exciting because I would be with my mother. Andrew informed me that his college buddy, Romeo, called to report he was getting married on Saturday, July 25th, and wanted him to be in his wedding. Knowing Andrew wanted to comply with Romeo's request, I encouraged him to schedule the event. Mother's Day, Sunday the 10th of May, was extra special for me because I was a new mom. I called Mama early that morning to wish her happy Mother's Day, even though I had sent her a card. She admitted being twice as excited about the day because she was a new grandmother who could wish her daughter to have a fine first Mother's Day. Oh yes, she sent me a card as well. Andrew took me and the baby out to dinner for my day. I received a red rose when we entered the restaurant. Judging by the amount of roses I spotted, there were a number of mothers in the restaurant. AJ seemed fascinated with the unfamiliar surroundings. He was exceptionally quiet. I suppose he was trying to figure out what it was all about. He became fixated on certain people in the restaurant and stared at them. When he realized it was all about eating, he became a bit more animated. The family at the next table remarked favorably about our very happy baby. The food was good and the people were friendly. All told, I had a very nice first Mother's Day. Shortly, the semester was over. I was not scheduled to teach voice during the summer, but the radio program continued as usual. Andrew had become quite the man at the clinic and in his medical world. Sometimes, however, he seemed a bit stressed because of the enormous responsibility that came with the job. Whenever I detected he was burdened, I tried to deflect his attention away from his job and on to something less challenging, yet beneficial to him, personally or to our family in general. Sometimes playing with the baby soothed him tremendously. I also gave him body massages to relax his muscles and his nerves, which he truly enjoyed. Father's Day, Sunday, June 21st, was a significant day for my husband. He was exceedingly proud to be a dad and was totally surprised when Daddy showed up at our house early that morning to celebrate their day together. I asked why Mama was not with him and found out she had special duties at the church pertaining to celebrating Father's Day. It seems she was involved in a Sunday school skit about Father's Day. She also knew Daddy and Andrew and AJ would have a great time together, and she was right. My guys lived it up that day and ate a lot too. I got a charge watching them whoop it up. I was pleased Andrew took his 2-week vacation beginning on his birthday, Saturday, July 18th, through Sunday, August 2nd. I scheduled my vacation from the radio station to coincide with Andrew's. We packed up, which included stroller and other baby items, and went to Youngstown for a celebration of my husband's 30th birthday, plus the anniversary of when we first met. Additionally, we planned to spend a few more days focusing on rehearsing for the LanYe Sopranos before moving on to Chicago for Romeo's wedding. My folks planned a small birthday gathering that Saturday, inviting our aunt, uncle, and cousins over for an evening of merriment. Andrew was in seventh heaven, cavorting with his family. There was plenty rich German chocolate cake and butter pecan ice cream. AJ laughed aplenty as he crawled from person to person. It was a mighty and memorable birthday celebration. The 5 of us went to church the next day, Sunday, July 19th. As per tradition, everyone dressed up. Mommy and Daddy were more excited than usual because baby AJ was going to his first church service. They sang in the choir while Andrew, AJ, and I sat in the congregation. I believe they smiled through the entire service. AJ was somewhat bewildered by all the activity during the service. As was his tendency, he dealt with it by being quiet and trying to figure it out. However, the music wowed him so much until he warbled along with the choir. Needless to say, people laughed as he carried on. Afterward, Reverend Jones commented on the baby soloing with the choir, saying he sang along with his grandparents. After the service, people gathered around to get a better look at our baby. He was overwhelmed with it all and whimpered a little. However, when his grandfather picked him up, he calmed down. Unexpectedly, there was a miracle of sorts that Sunday. Mrs. Smythe was on her best behavior and did not say anything inappropriate to Andrew. In fact, she spoke to me and complimented us about the baby. It turned out to be a splendid church day. Luckily, my parents agreed to keep AJ, which enabled us to travel to Chicago a little less encumbered. While there, Andrew showed me the building in which he spent his first 17 years. Now, however, things were much different. The combination of the neighborhood changing, plus the emphasis on individual group homes and foster parenting, forced the orphanage and school to close. At this time, the buildings were being used as an automotive repair, detailing, and classic car restoration training facility. Andrew had mixed emotions about the demise of his childhood residence, but quickly dismissed the notion of mourning its termination and continued giving me a tour of his old stomping grounds. Romeo's wedding was quite lavish. The ceremony was held rather large Episcopal cathedral. His bride, Candace, looked amazing in her wedding gown, which had a very, very long train. She had 8 bridesmaids and groomsmen. Andrew was honored to be a groomsman. I was happy to be a member of the audience. The cathedral choir and pipe organist provided celestial music. A trumpet player sounded the call for the arrival of the bride, which was very effective. All in all, the event was an overwhelming success. Needless to say, I had flashbacks to my beautiful outdoor wedding. It will always stand out in my mind as the absolute perfect wedding. Nevertheless, in the long run, it is the marriage itself that counts. Therefore, I am still jumping for joy that I married Andrew. Our marriage is stable and full of love. I wished this for Candace and Romeo. We drove to Youngstown to pick up the baby. To our surprise, he wasn't as much a baby as before because he was walking. Daddy said he had been playing with his grandson, coaxing AJ to find him in a game of hide and seek. AJ just got tired of crawling around, stood up, and walked or wobbled to his grandfather, giggling all the way. He then skedaddled to Mama in a tottering manner to show her he could walk. Things would be very different in the Porter household from now on. Once back in Erie, Andrew and I had 5 days left before our vacations were over. Since we had had such a busy and robust time in Youngstown and Chicago, we decided to unwind and take it easy for 3 days, with one exception. We did go to the zoo. Andrew and I both like zoos and wanted to show AJ the animals. He quickly became attracted to the animals and talked to them in his own language. Amazingly, some of the animals reacted to AJ as if they understood him. I was astonished to witness that level of interaction. When we were driving home, AJ spoke the names of the three animals he liked the best: bears, elephants, and owls. His unique pronunciation of elephant sounded like "ehefon," "ba," and "o." These words were added to his blossoming vocabulary of mama and baba. We made an effort to call him by the name AJ, so he would learn the sound of his name, react to it, and say it as well. I readily confessed to being fascinated at the process of learning and demonstrating to my son. Mrs. Atkins was surprised to hear words coming out of AJ, plus his ability to walk. She knew her job had become more involved and was prepared for the challenges ahead. Having gone through the process with her own children made the upcoming journey very palatable. She would be able to see AJ's progress little by little for the remainder of the summer, because I had only the radio program that took me away from home. Obviously, Mrs. Atkins would spend more time with my son when the school year started. Being in the month of August meant the final stage of memorizing all of the duet music. I had to balance my memorization with parental duties, which were different now that AJ was walking and somewhat talking. He liked to follow me around the house, so I played hide and seek with him like Daddy did. He giggled when he caught me, followed by hugs and kisses. I wished for him to be that affectionate forever. It puzzled him when I walked around reciting the words to songs, so instead I sang the songs with half soft voice, or as it is called, sottovoce. Doing that enabled me to place my light tones in my head voice, making it a valuable vocal technique. Sometimes I would put him in his high chair and sing to him, which he liked. Once I did that when Andrew came home, and he expressed being a little jealous. Jokingly, I told him they did not make adult high chairs. Therefore, he brought his easy chair over to me, and with a sad, pouty face, including poking out his lower lip, asked me to sing to him. I soothed him by singing the famous Brahms lullaby and told him to go to sleep. He acted like that and pretended to fall asleep. AJ closely watched with great interest and wondered about his father appearing to fall asleep so quickly. In like manner, he kicked his legs and made a pout face. I then sang the lullaby to him, and he pretended to fall asleep too. I then clapped my hands and said, "Wake up!" whereby both opened their eyes and began laughing. I went to my guys and kissed each on the cheek. Thus we had created a new family game. A critical piece of the LanYe sopranos was solved when I found a young, talented pianist in Erie who agreed to be our official accompanist. Thus, 21-year-old Hector Ramados, originally from Puerto Rico, had the right touch, natural flair, and personality for accompanying singers. Since Hector just graduated from one of the large New York State universities, he needed to build up his professional piano experience, and he was eager to unite with Mama and me. He listened carefully to me sing and took notes when I suggested a particular musical phrasing. When Mama came to rehearse, the duo made tremendous progress with Hector's skills. He commented on the beauty and balance of our voices. Now we were ready to embark upon our musical journey. We timed everything to the nth degree. By late August, I was beginning to send out notices about the LanYe Sopranos. The bulk mailings were a little pricey, but it had to be done. Without delay, organizations around the country contacted me. I suspect the uniqueness of our duo sparked the instant interest. The three of us were giddy over the responses. It seemed as though over the next few months, several weekends would be consumed by this very exciting project. It was necessary for me to limit the performances to weekends because Andrew could take care of AJ while we were away. Luckily, the distances were manageable. Buffalo, New York in late September, Louisville, Kentucky in mid-October, and Toledo, Ohio in early November. Suddenly, I had many irons in the fire and was about to be off and running. Fortunately, I had a handle on the radio program and my college voice teaching schedule and could accommodate this new enterprise. In short order, the duo had its debut in Buffalo at the new Hobson Music Depot, a space dedicated to exposing audiences to unconventional musical offerings. It's a recital hall and a theater in a round, whereby the audience surrounded the performers. Their rationale was to allow performers the ability to relate more directly and closer to audiences than is possible with a traditional proscenium stage. It meant for us that we did not need to stand in one spot. We could interact with each other and Hector. Nevertheless, we would be careful not to overdo it. We would still minimize gestures. The first engagement was an event to remember because Mama wanted our whole family to attend the recital. Andrew took Friday off. We picked up Hector and drove to Buffalo. Daddy and Mommy met us there. 3 rooms had been reserved in a very nice downtown hotel. AJ even had his very own baby bed. Mama made our matching attractive full-length copper earth-toned gowns. We adorned them with pretty jewelry and formal arm-length gloves, which made us look rather regal. It was a splendid and triumphant music evening. We sang as pretty as we looked. Hector was handsome in his tales and played masterfully. There was a warmth I'd never felt before while performing. I think we had divine assistance. Afterwards, the jubilation was infectious. Audience members commented on the sheer beauty of the entire experience. Daddy, Andrew, and AJ were extremely proud of us. AJ toddled up and hugged us, seeming to understand he had witnessed something special, which was amazing because he was only a year old. The Hobson staff provided a fine reception featuring Ethiopian cuisine from a highly regarded restaurant called Distinctly Ethiopian. They handled everything from the smallest to the largest detail professionally, competently, and humanely. The Louisville and Toledo appearances were equally successful and received enthusiastically. However, I did miss having the whole family with us, but Mama and I had learned to be on our own. The timing was perfect for the Porter family to spend Thanksgiving in Youngstown. I wanted AJ to see his grandparents regularly. Clearly, Andrew loved being with our parents. His bond was cemented in every way. Whenever they were in each other's presence, they seemed to be an ongoing, loving festival no matter which way we turned. I was surrounded by love and happy as a lark. I had plenty for which I could be thankful on Thanksgiving Day. The remainder of the year was productive and rewarding for everyone. My voice students were progressing nicely. The radio show remained a hit. Andrew was simply outstanding as a leader at the medical center. AJ was growing like a weed, talking to everybody he saw, in addition to waddling and running to get into everything he could. As expected, activities intensified during the Christmas holidays. Out of the blue, Waylon and family visited us on a Sunday during the season. They surprised us by arriving by 9:30 a.m., which meant they got up and at 'em by 6. Waylon Jr., now 19, had a car and brought his sisters. Waylon Sr., Ruthie, and mother rode comfortably in his car. It turned out to be a very exciting day at the Porter house. There was lots of food because they brought 2 picnic baskets filled with all kinds of goodies. They got a kick out of AJ and played non-stop with him. The kids also enjoyed playing ping pong in our basement rec room. The entire crew was very happy to hear about the success of the LanYe Sopranos. Waylon felt the duo would become famous. He also expressed more gratitude about his leg by telling Andrew how good the leg felt. My brother was a happy camper. It was a power-packed, fun-filled day. They headed back by 6 p.m. in order to get home at a decent hour. With a blink of the eye, it was 1971. I assumed things would continue as usual, but something was amiss. There were days in the process of my daily routine I found myself wandering around, feeling rather stupefied. I literally had trouble recognizing my environs. I did not feel sick, but gradually became more and more disoriented. During that stretch of time, I struggled relating to my own family. I was also depressed because, due to my unusual condition, I was not able to attend the funeral of my dear Aunt Dukes. Although I was polite to everyone, people kept asking me if I was okay, and I assured them I was fine, but a bit weary. Andrew was puzzled by my irregular demeanor. I managed to fulfill my professional and academic duties adequately enough to get by. In the meantime, some told me I had become unusually quiet. I claimed I was in deep thought. It got so bad until I asked my parents to take AJ for a week, hoping I could get myself together without medical help. I thought perhaps I was stressed out without knowing or admitting it, and needed complete rest. I also called in sick to deal with this condition. My biggest battle came at a time when Andrew had to travel to Salt Lake City, Utah, for a 3-day, very important conference. But because of my unusual behavior, he was reluctant to attend the conference. I told him I thought I was merely suffering from total exhaustion. I promised to get more rest and convinced him to go. So he took the early Thursday morning flight. I was relieved to be alone. I stretched out on the couch and took a nap. Unexpectedly, I was awakened by the sound of the doorbell. I jumped up, rather shaky, and went to the front door. A man told me my taxi was ready. I responded by telling him I had not called for a taxi. He then repeated my name and address and said he had orders to transport me. Again, I emphasized I needed no transportation anywhere because I had my own automobile. Nothing I said mattered to him. he was hell-bent on taking me somewhere, but wouldn't give specifics. Needless to say, I was suspicious of this man until he said his name was Ned Witherspoon. At that point, something clicked, but I did not know exactly what it was. He said no harm would come to me, but we must be on our way. It seemed I was hypnotized because I grabbed my coat, locked the house, and followed him to the taxi. He opened the back door and I went in. For some reason, I felt I knew this man. He was very friendly and advised me to relax and enjoy the trip. I asked where we were going, and he guaranteed I'd like our destination. In a flash, I fell sound asleep. In Nothing Flat we had arrived. He awakened me. As he drove down the street, he asked if the scenery seemed familiar. Astonishingly, I recognized the area and blurted out, "We're in D.C." He answered, "Yes," and continued by telling me he was the nephew of Maurice Witherspoon, whom I somehow remembered. He said the time had come for me to learn the truth about myself. He then explained what was happening and what had happened to me. At my conception, I had been designated a transcendent traveler, a person able to either shift to a parallel universe, change dimensions, or actually exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sometimes I seamlessly glided from dimension to dimension. In each dimension, I appeared to be extraordinarily musically talented and lived a very exciting musical life. But at the age of 23, there was a major shakeup in the universe which activated and energized my traveling gene. That alternation amounted to a collision of my dimensions, which upon impact left me off balance, causing me to slip into a very deep sleep. While asleep, my subconsciousness propelled itself into a different dimension. The dimensions looked so similar until I didn't notice the subtle differences. However, my relationship with each was different, and so were the consequences. Ned Witherspoon was chosen to assist me on this revealing journey because he too was a traveler. He explained, when I was born, my consciousness and physical manifestation was in dimension number 1. It stayed there until May 1967, where my consciousness and physical manifestation shifted to dimension number 2 briefly. Thus, I was operational in both dimensions. I then began seamlessly sliding from dimension number 2 to number 1 at certain intervals for about 5 weeks, thus resulting in sudden, strange sleep patterns. The worst, weird sleep happened the morning my mother desperately tried to awaken me, Thursday, June 29, 1967. That skirmish ended my tie-in with dimension number 2 until today, February 11th, 1971. At that time in 1967, for some unknown reason, the mystical alignment shifting process got stalled or stuck catapulting me into dimension number 1 up to the time I was driving to the music festival in the Berkshires on Saturday, June 31st, 1967, and had to pull over to take a nap. When I awakened, I was in a new dimension, number 3. Therefore, from then on, my consciousness and physical being, which encompassed everything concerning my life and my marriage to Andrew, has been in dimension number 3. Even more shocking was to learn I currently existed and have existed my entire life simultaneously functioning successfully in dimension number 1. However, today was the day I would be able to experience the shift from dimension number 3 back to dimension number 2, because the intergalactic planetary lineup synchronization was perfect for such an action. The taxi served as a teleportation device that enabled me to reach DC in a bat of the eye. Unfortunately, my window of opportunity was limited to only a few hours. Then dimension 2 would fade and disappear completely and forever from my subconsciousness as it had done before. But this time, it would be permanent. Dimension number 2 will exist no more. As one would imagine, this information unblocked much inside my mind, which befuddled me from time to time. Now I understood the eerie feelings and inexplicable retrospection I confronted periodically. Ned explained further, saying this counter will permit me to grasp the gist of the way all of this works. Well, we pulled into the driveway of the Washington NABA office, and I was instantly remembered as I looked around. I remembered being there with Bishop Scottsdale. When I entered the building and reached the NABA office, I gulped because everything that happened in this office was clear as a bell. Ned told me neither Miss Haynes nor the bishop would be there. A fellow named Harvey greeted me and asked if he could be of assistance. I told him I was in town for a short period of time and decided to visit here and catch up on the happenings. Harvey said it was another quiet day. In fact, when the bishop became ill, the atmosphere in the office turned somber and remains that way. He lamented over the fact that ever since the bishop lost his young fiancée back in 1967, his health had steadily declined. I asked what happened to her, and he said no one knew. The word was she never showed up to meet the bishop in Buffalo for the church denomination convention. No one had seen her since she left her home in Youngstown, Ohio, headed for Buffalo. The police speculated she may have stopped at a rest area to use the lavatory and was kidnapped. She might have been drugged and put into another car while a second abductor drove her car to points unknown. Understandably, her parents were devastated and agonized over her disappearance. The FBI did all they could to find her, but without a single clue, they hit a wall. Furthermore, the case is still open because no corpse or car was ever found. Some people believe the young opera singer was kidnapped and forced to live in a distant land under a different name with a new appearance. Continuing, he said the bishop became completely distraught and emotionally wrecked. He was unable to preside over the church convention and was admitted to a hospital for an evaluation. They reported he had some sort of nervous breakdown. From then on, he could not perform his duties as a bishop and resigned. He continued in the NABA office on and off for approximately 2 more years until his health took a turn for the worse. He now has cancer. He lost weight and was not able to meet the strenuous requirements of his job. Therefore, an interim chairman was appointed, and the bishop is not expected to be with us much longer. I was shaken by what he said, but tried not to show it for fear he might think I was the missing fiancé. That discordant information was acutely difficult to absorb because, through no fault of my own, I had ruined the bishop's life and my parents' lives in this dimension. Is this what is implied when people say it just wasn't meant to be? Maybe so, but it was certainly ugly. I asked the whereabouts of Miss Haynes and was told she was the only bright spot in the report, for she married the insurance man who worked in the building and moved to San Antonio, Texas, where he headed a new publishing company. She became the director of the Handicapped Americans Texas chapter and is very happy. However, she too had been greatly affected by the bishop's situation and his declining health. I realized the time was passing, so I thanked Harvey for the information and left. Once inside the taxi, I asked Ned how my parents were doing. He told me my father resigned from the steel mill and they were moving back down south, either to Virginia or North Carolina, to get away from the constant reminder of the life they had with their beloved daughter. I thought the only consolation they will ever have is not knowing exactly what happened to me. They hope and pray I am living somewhere and doing just fine. In a very strange way, their prayers were answered. If only I could see them and put their minds at ease. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Despite the fact I learned what happened to me in June of 1967, I would not be able to remember all this when I am returned to Erie. I would, however, still have dreams that make no sense, with bits and pieces of this day scattered throughout my visions. Nevertheless, I was grateful for the opportunity to see and hear it for myself. I asked Ned if there were many people who functioned in 2 or 3 dimensions. He didn't know exactly, but thought perhaps only a very few. Those who did were very fortunate without knowing it. He figured some of those chosen people tended to feel about things, places, and people in particular ways and thought it was because of having this thing that was spelled ANAMNESIS. Was the previous experiences stored somewhere in the mind, and the theory of Platonism, recollection of ideas which the soul had known in a previous existence. Platonism. Imagine that. There is much about our world we don't understand, and we are probably better off not understanding everything because some might come to the conclusion they are superhuman and manage to destroy our planet, thus upsetting the order in the universe and ending life as we know it. Dimension number 2 was once again positioned to intersect with number 1 very soon. So Ned stepped on the gas pedal, which was actually an advanced high-energy particle accelerator with a velocity that put me out like a light. We must have been soaring atemporally, thus existing without relation to time, while gliding through realms. When I was returned to Erie and inside my house, the dimension number 3, mental and emotional state of mind, was fully operational, and I no longer felt discombobulated. I got up from the couch feeling invigorated. I thought to myself, it is amazing how a little nap will replenish the body's necessities. Perhaps my system rejected my busy lifestyle and forced me to slow down. My self-imposed vacation was the key to my recovery. I stayed inside and lounged. I even refused to talk on the telephone. The quiet and solitude agreed with me. It permitted me to slow down my inner clock and refuel. Athletes will admit the need for complete rest after a tough game. If they don't get to rest, they become less and less effective and will jeopardize a position and a positive outcome in a championship match. Common sense should have told me, metaphorically speaking, I had run too many marathons and needed blessed quietness. Without hesitating, I got back on the couch and slept there all night. I was awakened the next morning by a telephone. As I expected, it was Andrew. I gleefully told him how much better I felt. I explained to him I had been extremely run down, but did not know it until things started unraveling. I tried to be everything to everybody. After so long, my body, mind, and spirit took exception to my constant push for perfection. Embedded deep within my mind, I challenged myself unnecessarily. I also had doubts about my ability to be a first-rate wife, mother, top-flight singer, radio personality, and voice teacher simultaneously. I had become my worst enemy. My air of self-confidence was veiled in fear. Andrew totally understood because he felt responsible for everybody at the medical center, yet walked the tightrope trying to balance his professional life and his personal life. Secretly, he constantly tried to prove his worth. I was finally able to tell him we both should relax more. Chuckling, he said we needed a sabbatical. We ended that revealing conversation, promising to ease off pressuring ourselves. I then called my parents and explained my recovery. Naturally, Mama was understanding. She purposely stayed out of my professional life and my marriage in order for me to be able to work out kinks in my own way. In other words, she and Daddy respected me as an adult. They were nevertheless happy to babysit AJ whenever I needed a time out. I was extremely grateful for their assistance. Daddy brought AJ back Saturday afternoon. I was happy to see him until I played with him nonstop until his bedtime. While settling in my bed that night, I missed Andrew terribly. Somehow, seemingly right on cue, he called from the airport to let me know he was on his way home. He left the conference before the dinner in order to catch an earlier return flight. I couldn't stop kissing my dear husband when he got home. Andrew immediately noticed how much better my outlook on life had manifested itself upon my personality and demeanor. He was very happy to see me happy. While in Salt Lake City, Andrew took a tour and found himself perusing the famous genealogical library with his buddy Harold Sims from the Albany, New York Health Center, who was also attending the conference. Harold was excited because he found much information about his family. Andrew, on the other hand, was only piddling around because he had no family. Nevertheless, just for the heck of it, he looked up his name. As he expected, there were many Andrew Porters. But much to his complete surprise, there was only one Andrew Emerson Porter listed. He found out Porter was his mother's last name, and her first name was Gladys. She was only 16 years old and not married when she had a baby boy on July 18, 1940. Having no way to support herself and a baby, she reluctantly gave up the baby to the Greenleaf Orphanage in Chicago. Unfortunately, she died from pneumonia at only 36 years of age. Andrew would have been 20 and a junior in college. No father was mentioned. At her deathbed, she revealed this information, which the courts certified. At least Andrew now knew a bit about his roots and understood the predicament that forced his teenage mother to give him away. This information made him feel better about his existence. The next few months went smoothly, except for the passing of Ruthie's mother, Mrs. Frivard. Although I had not seen her much, I thought she was a very kind lady and would be missed by all who knew her. I sent condolences to Ruthie. My family duties increased daily. AJ was growing fast and talking constantly. My son wanted answers to many, many questions, so I had to be an encyclopedia for him. Mama and I carefully chose dates and places for us to perform in order to leave enough time for family. Our reputation as the fabulous mother-daughter soprano duo catapulted us into an untapped musical height, which allowed us to make the rules for performing. We were guests on a few television shows in selected cities and interviewed frequently by reputable music authorities representing music schools. Daddy retired from the steel mill, which allowed him to spend more time at home with Mama and travel with us to our concert engagements. They were like newlyweds enjoying every moment together. Naturally, they both spoiled AJ. My son loved his mamo and papo. My rank at the college was elevated to associate professor, and the radio program expanded to a once-a-month TV classical music special with in-studio performances by invited musicians. Phillips Woodwind Ensemble, NEO, had the distinction of being my first guests. It was extremely exciting because Ursula and little Phil came with Philip to make it a family affair. Andrew also participated in the discussion, explaining how he met me because of Philip playing at the Music Festival of the Berkshires back in 1967. The LanYe Sopranos performance schedule and everything else slowed down significantly when I became pregnant with my second child. For some reason, I was wiped out for the final 2 months. Fortunately, they were the months of June and July when things were much less hectic. Naturally, my folks came to my rescue by keeping AJ a few weekends to give Andrew and me a break. I asked Mama how she managed to keep herself on track when she was carrying me. She revealed how the times were different, plus she didn't have a job. Therefore, she had less demands on her during her time. At the end of July 1972, I had a beautiful little girl whom we named Odyssey Johanna Porter, after Mama and me. We called her Ojo. AJ, then almost 3, was crazy about his baby sister. He watched her and notified me about her every need. When the Myers crew came by to see the new member of the family, Phil, now almost 5, remarked about remembering when AJ was a little baby. AJ immediately told Phil he was a big boy now. Phil fired back, telling AJ He was his big brother. Ursula broke up the heated discussion by reminding the boys there was a new baby to love and cherish. Actually, Ursula was happy and sad. Because of some sort of female problem, she was not able to have any more children. Therefore, Phil was her all in all. She was, of course, a sort of aunt godmother to my children, and she was certainly blessed to have a fabulous husband and a fantastic son. My precious baby daughter, Ojo, looked a lot like me, but had her own personality. As she grew, she processed things rapidly and voiced her approval or objection robustly. She was firm in her convictions and assured of her conclusions. Everything she did quickly, thoroughly, and always in high gear. Some of those traits manifested themselves quite well for her, since she actually ran to everything and to everybody. For some reason, she insisted on getting where she was going promptly. AJ, on the other hand, was much more relaxed and cerebral as he went about his modus operandi. Phil was equally cerebral and analytical, but with an artsy, out-of-the-box kind of twist. The 70s whizzed by, with each person progressing nicely in his or her particular role. Sadly, however, Uncle Isaac was killed in a car accident. He was my grandmother's brother, so the family was getting smaller. The LanYe sopranos were a staple in the vocal world, and Hector was a sought-after accompanist by reputable singers and instrumentalists. Andrew traveled more and more, far and wide, consulting with doctors about innovative concepts, techniques, and procedures in prosthetics. My children were doing quite well in school. Before we knew it, the Porter and Myers families were ushering in 1980 together. We had a fun-filled evening talking about things that would be remembered about the 70s. The kids were growing up and were best friends. During that year, Phil would become a teen at age 13. AJ would turn 11. Ojo would turn 8. We were proud parents. Philip would be 38, Ursula 37, and I would turn 36. Andrew, turning 40 that year, was no longer called the young up-and-coming head honcho because he was thought to be the well-established director of the medical center. Beyond a doubt, the kids were still reeling from the enormous Christmas they just had, sharing special time with each other in Erie and Mentor and with their grandparents in Youngstown. Each remarked how blessed they were to be in such a large and loving family. It is a big celebration for kids when their birthday arrives, but not so much for older people. For the first time, I was aware how much my parents were aging. Daddy's hair turned white, and Mama began to slow down. However, the most telltale sign for Mama was her singing voice. She was unable to easily control it like before, and became frustrated attempting to do so. It is monumentally difficult for trained female singers to admit the soprano voice gets worn out after so long. I told her that being a classical singer is physically and mentally demanding, much like a dancer or a professional athlete, and there is a time limit. She was wise to face that fact and knew she should end her allotted time gracefully. After our heart-to-heart talk, we decided to dissolve the LanYe Sopranos. However, we planned to go out in style by having a grand finale in Erie on my TV show. We picked music we sang well and the easiest to make it a joyous ending. The program was filmed in the college auditorium with a packed audience. The city of Erie was extremely proud of us and supported us wholeheartedly. It was a grand and spectacular evening and the highlight of 1981. We sang the best ever. I did not know Mama's problem was bigger than her voice. In the course of time, approximately 4 months after our farewell concert, Mama revealed to me she had breast cancer. She had a noticeable lump on her breast. The doctors said it was terminal cancer because it had also spread to her lungs and bones. She was hospitalized and treated with radiation therapy and chemotherapy. I was horrified about this revelation and frightened beyond belief. My dear beloved mother was suffering from the number one most vicious disease. It was hard for me to wrap my head around the fact because she had seldom been sick except for an occasional cold. I wondered how cancer invaded her body. I had to tell the entire family about Mama's situation. A dark cloud followed me around. I had great difficulty doing my jobs and tending to my children. Andrew was likewise affected, but he tried to be strong in order to hold us together. The kids were incredibly sad to hear their mama was very, very sick. During the summer, I took the kids with me to Youngstown to be near Mama. I visited her every day and brought little trinkets the kids made for her. She managed to smile and always asked how everyone was doing. Each time she asked, I knew she still put everyone ahead of herself. Daddy was a wreck too. He often spent nights at the hospital, sleeping in a chair next to the bed. I encouraged him to go home, take a hot bath, and be with the kids a while. Although it was difficult for Waylon and the family to travel because Ruthie also worked, they successfully coordinated their schedules by Ruthie changing her off day to Monday, matching Waylon's day off, and visited Mama on Mondays, which seemed to make Mama very happy. Andrew also spent weekends in Youngstown to be near his mom. The Myers family made visits on Sundays. The next few years were tense times for all of us. Although we continued our routines, we were on edge. Mama slowly responded to the treatment and showed some improvement. By 1983, her cancer was in remission. She looked much better and gradually began going about her life. My children, now 14 and 11, were overjoyed to make visits to Youngstown. Daddy was much less stressed and anxious to do things with Mama and the entire family. Christ Memorial AAMU Church was so surprised to see Mama in the congregation until the service took on an intense, celestial, holy quality, the likes of which they had never experienced. The church folks said it was like having one of God's angels sitting amongst them. One day when Philip, Ursula, and Phil, now 16, came to visit Mama, Daddy took the kids and Philip to the stock car race in Canfield, Ohio, near Youngstown. Ursula and I preferred to stay home with Mama, but I was delighted Daddy did that because it lightened up the atmosphere. And he took me there when I was a teenager. He likes stock car races so much until he actually jumps up and hollers at the car as they pass. The kids told me they got such a kick out of their animated papo yelling at the cars until they joined him in his enthusiasm, jumped up and down, and waved the cars onward to victory. Mama took quality time with my children. She had heart-to-heart talks with them, as well as playing educational games. Her favorite was name the state capital of whatever state. My children were already smart, partly because Andrew and I quizzed them periodically about various topics, and partly because they were blessed with good brains. However, having Mama nudging them about subjects increased their knowledge. AJ soaked up information like a sponge, and Ojo could remember trivia with ease. AJ took after Mama in math. The two of them loved working on problems to see who would get the answer first. All of us loved history. Often we would sit around the dining room discussing history. June 1985. Mama was rushed to the hospital. The cancer had returned with a vengeance. It was as bad as could be, and within a week, she passed. She was now with the Creator and suffering no more. Although I realized the severity of her condition and figured she had only a limited time left, I still could not face the fact she was gone. I loved Mama more than I loved myself. She was the best mother in the world to me. Andrew took Mama's passing very hard, too. My children were sad the entire summer. I could not let Daddy live by himself, so he came to Erie and stayed with us for a month. He and Andrew spent a lot of time together. Everyone felt somewhat off balance and rather out of it until school started. AJ and Ojo demonstrated outstanding swimming and track and field skills. Neither ever mentioned their athletic talents because each enjoyed these activities in regular gym classes. For them, it was just a class requirement routine, run-of-the-mill weekly grind, which seemed natural to them. They used gym class as a stress reliever. But AJ was developing into a first-rate swimmer, and Ojo could outrun all the girls in her class. After a couple months, Andrew and I asked Daddy to live with us permanently. He agreed to do so quickly and sold the house and furniture in Youngstown, and within 5 weeks relocated to Erie. He needed to leave the house, which had become a constant reminder of his wonderful years with Mama. Daddy was simply too lonely to remain in the place which held so many memories. I was pleased to be able to take care of Daddy because he certainly took good care of me in my youth. He soon became involved with the kids. For AJ, it was touching to see him teaching him how to drive the car. Ojo got his attention by having him pick her up after track practice, which was outdoors. Thus, he had ample opportunity to watch her progress and also meet and have talks with the track coach. The most surprising aspect of having Daddy with us was that he cooked appetizing dinners for us. In all my days with him, he never cooked anything. Therefore, I did not know he could cook. He jokingly told me he was earning his keep. AJ began looking into his future. Like his father, he leaned towards choosing a profession to help people. He was very seriously thinking about using his swimming talent to rescue people during times of turmoil on the seas by way of the United States Coast Guard. It made a lot of sense. First, he had to get into the Academy of the Coast Guard. He would be in on a wonderful tradition in an elite school. Second, his mind and body would be trained at the highest level. Third, he would fulfill his military obligations and requirements. Fourth, should he decide to remain in active duty for 30 years, he would have a sufficient retirement at a relatively young age. The United States Coast Guard is well known as the oldest life-saving service in the world. Its roles include maritime safety and security, plus critical service in protection of natural resources. Andrew was thrilled with AJ's passion to help people, and he highly respected the United States Coast Guard. However, he forewarned AJ about the strenuous training. He told him rescue swimmers must have flexibility, strength, endurance, and be able to function in heavy seas. Hearing all that made AJ more determined to meet the challenge, and he made up his mind to go in that direction. Teamwork, leadership skills, seamanship, and physically exhaustive exercises were okay with him. I did have one glaring concern: the racial climate at the academy. Would my son be treated fairly, or would he be in a hostile environment? There were but a small number of black cadets registered, and historically only a few had graduated from the academy. Perhaps I was overly sensitive, but I couldn't help wonder about these things. Then I thought to myself, I bet the percentage of black cadets would be similar to the number of black students in music conservatories. Since I fared quite well in my situation, AJ will also stay the course. Being a person and a parent of a child like this certainly made me gauge life a bit different than I had for myself. In 1987, after graduating from high school as valedictorian of his class, my son fulfilled his dream and started life at the academy of the Coast Guard. I was proud of him, but also sad to see him leave home. However, my teenage daughter was still at home and getting all the attention. Ojo became a track star in school while being on the honor roll. In 1990, she graduated from high school at age 17 and received a full athletic and academic scholarship combo to the college of her choice, Central Ohio University. I was very happy my daughter chose an historic black university to further her education. I cheered mightily because the black colleges and universities in this country were overlooked by guidance counselors at predominantly white high schools, while suggesting schools that might suit bright graduating seniors. I knew Ojo should be able to reach her potential at this school, which would foster her in a way a white school couldn't. The decade of the 90s had its ups and downs. Andrew and I were now empty nesters. The upside was the success my children found in their respective colleges. AJ had become an outstanding cadet and seemed to be awarded something periodically. Although I did not fully understand the significance of the awards, I knew he was being recognized for his exceptional accomplishments. He graduated third in his class in 1991 and had collected an impressive number of medals and pins. It was a spectacular sight to watch at the Academy pageantry as it progressed. Andrew and I were bursting with pride. Our son, Andrew Jonas Porter, was highly regarded and began his life as an officer in the United States Coast Guard. Ojo was a straight-A student majoring in phys ed, sports medicine. She immersed herself in studying how the human body works physically and mentally when engaging in sports. My daughter was obsessed with every aspect of the academy when in motion and how to better prepare the body for certain sports. She used herself as a guinea pig and managed to excel using her findings. Ojo wanted to discover something that would allow females to reach new heights in sports. From his school days excelling in art classes, Phil developed into a crackerjack artist designer. He could draw anything he saw or didn't see if someone described the thing. Phil painted gorgeous portraits of Ojo 3 or 4 times when he visited us. Each time, he captured the essence of her spirit and personality from a different perspective, angle, and location. He also designed stunning buildings. Phil received a full scholarship to the Cleveland College of Art and Design and quickly became a rising star. By his junior year, he had a highly acclaimed art studio and sold his paintings at healthy prices. In addition to that success, he opened an architecture design firm called PhilArt Inc. He graduated in 1989 as the art school celebrity headed toward a powerful career. Ojo revealed to me the story about Phil visiting her at Central Ohio University when his firm was chosen to submit blueprints for a new student center on the campus. He had the mind of a business executive, but the appearance of a way out artist with his long hair pulled back into a ponytail. He was a hit on the campus because of his non-conforming, unorthodox manner and his obvious tie to Ojo. Naturally, the students and administrators were curious about this acquaintanceship and inquired about it with Ojo. She told them about the brotherhood between their fathers and that they had known each other all their lives. Seldom had those black students seen such an out-there white fellow. They didn't perceive him as a Jew because Jews look like white people to them. And no one had ever known Ojo to be close to any guy, black or white, because she had been totally devoted to her studies and nicknamed Miss Bookworm. The university loved Phil's design and voted to go forth with the building of the structure. Phil then put on a suit and took Ojo, also dressed up, to a fancy restaurant to celebrate. During the evening, Phil proposed marriage to Ojo. He told her he loved her ever since she was 14 years old. Ojo said yes and confessed falling in love with Phil when he began drawing her when she was 15. Both struggled with having personal feelings for someone who was like a member of the family, but their heartfelt convictions were out. It was October 1992. Phil, 25, and Ojo, 20, decided to marry the following October, when Ojo would be a full legal adult and a college graduate. Unfortunately, the downside to this October time period was the passing of Ruthie and Daddy's serious illness. I attended Ruthie's funeral, witnessed my brother's sadness, then came home to find Daddy in the hospital with numerous tubes connected to him. Sorrow was thrashing me again. I didn't even know what was wrong with Daddy. I only knew his health had declined substantially. Gradually, the tubes were removed, and he got well enough to leave the hospital. As much as he tried to cover his discomfort at home, I knew he was not up to par. Andrew and I cared for him as best we could until it became necessary to transfer him to a special facility. Many family and friends came to Erie during Christmas time that year to visit Daddy at Hillsworth haven. He had so many visitors on Christmas Day until we were permitted to assemble in a larger room. That would be Daddy's last Christmas. He passed in January 1993. There was an emptiness inside me that persisted for several weeks. The two pillars of my life were gone. Were it not for my loving husband, I might have fallen apart. Luckily, I also had a radio show plus a full line of voice students scheduled to soak up my sadness. The house seemed lonely with no one but Andrew and me living in it. However, Andrew reminded me that the house only had the two of us when we bought it. Therefore, we would continue to love each other and be thankful for the many blessings God has given us throughout our lives. I immersed myself into the classical music of Black composers. Once a month, my radio program featured compositions created by people seriously overlooked and neglected in music history classes at the majority of American music conservatories, university schools of music, and liberal arts college music departments. I became a sought-after guest lecturer at numerous academic institutions, libraries, and museums. Targeting this flawed system of course requirements required me to investigate the textbooks used in the classroom, plus check the angle, perspective, and time allotted by music history professors. My findings were dismal. Across the country, schools continue to teach only a fraction of actual music truth. I had to do more than lecture. I had to inject a sense of urgency about readjusting the topics emphasized within music history books and music history classes. I also confronted orchestral conductors and choral directors about programming music works by Black composers. Simply stated, it was time to challenge the status quo. My work intensified significantly. Not surprisingly, I was met with indifference, coldness, and contempt by 95% of every school I contacted. Deans of numerous institutions told me their curriculum met the standards and the requirements of the accrediting agencies, and there was not enough time to add more to the essentials. That, of course, was their way of saying they would not change or even alter anything about the current state of affairs. I kept saying to myself, how can institutions of higher learning persist in disseminating deficient information? I answered myself by acknowledging the extreme racism in America. It boils down to white is right and blacks have no facts. I began speaking to Black civic organizations, Black sororities and fraternities, and of course, Black churches. They listened and agreed, but were not willing to take on the well-oiled academic machine that ran this country. They only wanted to live the American dream of having a good job and owning a home. In a way, I understood their reluctance to dig into this issue. It was hard enough to earn a decent living. They could not risk tampering with their livelihoods. I, too, wanted to live the so-called American dream, but I could see beyond this outer veneer of that dream. I knew until Black people's accomplishments were taught and known, we would never attain the status of human beings able to go toe-to-toe with white people on any point in question. I took little breaks from my ongoing battles to focus on Ojo's upcoming college graduation, class of 1993, and her fall wedding. She graduated summa cum laude and delivered the speech representing the senior class. I was a proud mother, and it was a proud moment for Andrew and me. Ojo and Phil insisted on having a small, private wedding, so I didn't have much to do. However, Ojo did ask me to sing, and I agreed to do so. I informed her that my mother sang at my wedding. Therefore, it has become a family tradition. She wanted me to sing Stevie Wonder's fine piece, You and I, because she heard me sing it to Andrew a few years ago, and stated then she hoped I would sing it at her wedding someday. Here we are on earth together. It's you and I. God has made us fall in love. It's true. I've really found someone like you. Will it stay the love you feel for me? Will it say you will be by my side to see me through until my life is through? Well, in my mind, we can conquer the world in love, you and I, you and I, you and I. They decided to tie the knot on the yacht of one of Phil's wealthy clients, who also offered to pay for the entire event. Philip, Ursula, Andrew, and I could, as they say, sit back and relax. We would be flown to Miami to witness the ceremony. As per request, the guests dressed in casual attire, everyone dressed in keeping with the blue and white color scheme theme of the yacht. I wore a powder blue sundress with matching dainty flats. Andrew wore a navy blue shirt, white pants, and white boat shoes. The maid of honor, Kendra McIntosh, Ojo's best friend from high school, wore an attractive short medium blue dress with dark blue wedge sandals. Ojo looked really pretty in her short white dress, which showed off her lovely legs, and pale blue wedge sandals. Phil, who had a cute baby face, looked great in his open collar pale blue shirt with a white sport coat and dark blue pants and shoes. AJ, the best man, looked quite handsome in his appropriate blue Coast Guard uniform. I didn't think my singing would have such an effect on people, but Andrew, Philip, Ursula, AJ, Kendra, Phil, and Ojo all cried as I sang. Truthfully, the end result had almost everyone in attendance crying. Somehow, I refrained from crying long enough to sing, but cried throughout the rest of the service. It truly was a lavish jamboree on an impressive vessel. I never experienced anything like it before. Phil and Ojo flew to the Bahamas for their honeymoon. My little girl was now full grown, married, and with a college degree. I turned 50 in 1994, and Andrew turned 54. We were considered a power couple because of our widespread involvement in multiple aspects of life. Andrew was now the president of an organization dedicated to the placement of orphaned black children called the Enrichment Black Family Network. He was dedicated to giving black children a permanent family environment, different from foster homes. It was not a government agency, so it was able to reach needy children in ways not utilized by the government. His determination paid off numerous times by having families commit to a particular child and legally adopting that child. The final tragedy of the 90s was the passing of my brother Waylon in 1997. He was rushed to the hospital one evening and was gone the following morning. The cause of his death remains a mystery. I understand that death is a part of life, but the reality of it hurts mightily and changes one's perspective about the here and now. In 1998, Phil and Ojo announced they were adopting mixed-race twin babies, a girl and a boy, named Frida and Freddie. Needless to say, Andrew was overjoyed to learn about their plans to adopt because they had used his organization to find these babies. Andrew reminded me that here in the U.S., if one is half black, this country considers that person to be black. The history behind the brouhaha concerning one's race came about during slavery time, when the law went so far as to indicate how much black blood made a person black, as if being black was horrible. When will society ever understand we are all one race, the human race? Andrew told me the babies were from a black man and a Jewish woman whose parents did not want black children in their family. Both sets of parents forced the couple to give up the babies and stop their relationship altogether. I was excited and looked forward to seeing the babies. Soon we would become grandparents. The babies were adorable. I could not tell them apart for a few months. Eventually, however, they began to take on female and male traits, which allowed me to know who was who. Since they came from the same racial pairing as Ojo and Phil, they even seemed to resemble them. However, it could have been my imagination. Nevertheless, Frida and Freddie landed in a loving family. Ursula and Philip were absolutely ecstatic over their new grandchildren and were happy they lived close to Phil and Ojo in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. The Heights, as it was called, was an ideal community for mixed-race couples. It was also a well-educated and artistic community. New Year's Eve 1999 was a big deal. Many thought computers would go haywire in 2000. So some removed their money from banks, fearing ATMs would not work, while others waited to see what would happen. The anticipation was incredible. Andrew and I watched TV all day as country after country around the globe brought in the year 2000. After many hours, it was our turn in the eastern United States time zone. By that time, we were worn out and so tired until we hugged and kissed, rolled over, and went to sleep. When we awakened, the morning news shows assured a people that nothing happened to computers and ATM machines. Nevertheless, it was strange saying 2000 instead of 1999. It was hard for me to believe Andrew would be 60 years old and AJ 31 later that year. Luckily, our 2-year-old grandchildren were there to keep us young at heart. In 2003, Ojo began coaching girls basketball and long-distance running at a newly built community center near her home. It was a perfect setup because she would bring the twins with her and drop them off at the child care facility located inside the center. She not only coached but also taught classes in nutrition and was a personal trainer for selected female college-age athletes. That newly built structure was like no other community center because it was designed by PhilArt Inc. and was outfitted with the latest state-of-the-art equipment. Ojo was happy to have the right apparatus, devices, and gizmos in order to maximize the effectiveness of the workouts. One contraption they had she really liked because she conceived and sketched it herself when she was in college. After she submitted it to an exercise equipment company and pointed out the benefits of the doodad, they were convinced of its effectiveness, produced and marketed it across the whole country. What a coup it was for her, because she earned a percentage from every sale. As they say, it's the real deal, patented by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. By 2007, AJ, at age 38, had reached the rank of captain in the Coast Guard. He loved his life in that service branch because it embraced so much of that which he deemed important to the fiber of life. Integrity ranked high on his list of quintessential qualities, and the Coast Guard embodied that principle with its sense of equitableness. 2008 was a difficult year for Andrew because he came down with severe and nagging bronchitis. He coughed continuously, which then contributed to his chronic laryngitis. He tried to go on with his job duties, but found it increasingly difficult to fulfill those obligations. After a while, he was forced to take several medical leaves of absence from the clinic. Naturally, each time he sought professional help, but it did nothing to alleviate his problems. Andrew suffered more every time he returned to the medical center. After so much failure, he dug deep and investigated minute details about everything surrounding his life prior to this aggravation. He found he was allergic to the new cleaning product used by the maintenance unit. There was an ingredient in that product which was nearly lethal to Andrew. He immediately had them stop using the product. Little by little, he got better. But unfortunately, permanent damage had been done to his bronchial tubes. That irritation also caused him to have a lung infection, which is an inflammation in or around the lung tissue. That period of 4 months encouraged Andrew to think about retiring. After all, he had been at that clinic 40 years and was 68 years old. We talked it over and decided he should retire. In fact, I took a look at myself and realized I had been at the college radio station since the fall of 1968 and began teaching voice there in January 1969. Perhaps I should also retire. It certainly was a glaring revelation for me to also grapple with getting older. Nothing prepares us for it because we don't notice the process until it smacks us in the face or knocks us down. I was aware of my energy level reduction over the past year, but didn't want to admit it. I thought it simply was a result of father time making his presence known. Andrew's formal retirement announcement was met with expressions of lamentation for a man leaving his life's calling. Everyone was sad to hear he had reached his time to step down. The medical center was rated #1 in the country for orthotic and prosthetic care because Andrew had been at the helm to guide them down the path of success. The clinic threw Andrew a spectacular retirement extravaganza. People in his field of expertise flew in from all over the world to pay tribute to a man who helped so many put their lives back together after the tragedy of losing a body part. Naturally, I was moved by the response of so many people. The greatest sight was seeing people arrive who were walking or talking because Andrew oversaw the production of a particular kind of prosthesis which allowed them to function very close to normal again. One woman stood at the podium and told her story of surviving a near-death crash when she was sandwiched between two 18-wheel semi-trucks that had a double jackknife accident. The smash-up went from bad to worse by occurring on a bridge. She was trapped inside her car and bleeding profusely from her ear. It took the ingenuity of one of the rescuers to be able to cut her out of the vehicle without falling to their deaths hundreds of feet below. Once out, no ambulance was in view because nothing could get through the bottleneck and heap of mangled metal on the bridge. Therefore, the same man who cut her out carried her down the road. He finally met another rescuer who took the woman and put her inside the ambulance, stuck in traffic blockage, sitting along the side of the road. The first rescuer and the woman were then rushed to the nearest hospital. However, the woman had lost her right ear. After surviving the nightmare, she was left traumatized and disfigured. Andrew was called to evaluate her situation. Andrew designed and constructed an ear prosthesis that not only looked natural, but also, because of the implant procedure itself, improved her hearing around 20%. She turned to Andrew and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. The entire audience stood and applauded robustly. Andrew walked over to the woman and hugged her. Nothing more needed to be said about my husband's amazing career, for this woman had summed it up. I was so very proud of him until I saw him as a saint. AJ said his pop was a modern-day good shepherd. I could not believe I was married to this man. He never changed his reason for doing what he did. He simply wanted to help people. His short farewell speech was a thank you to all who had been with him and sponsored his leadership over the years. What an inspiring evening it was. I was happy the entire event was videotaped so we could relive it at any time. An account of the event was on the front page of the Erie newspaper the next day. Andrew was certain to be among the most acclaimed black men in the history of that city. The irony of that was Andrew never aspired to be famous in any way, shape, or form. He was a humble man to the core of his being. The next year, I retired from actively singing and from my radio show and college faculty position with very little fanfare. I merely said farewell to my radio audience and thanked them for listening for 41 years. The college newspaper wrote a wonderful front-page article about my years at the station and chronicled my accomplishments since I started the program. The radio staff took me and my husband out to dinner and shared stories about certain shows I had aired. Everyone had a good time. They were a congenial group of young adults who promoted my point of view about music. I knew I would miss them, but it was time for me to move on. The music department had grown substantially over the course of 40 years and was headed in a good direction as far as typical college curriculum offerings go. We had a solid assemblage of highly qualified middle-aged music faculty who sought to make Erie Coastal Shores College a musical powerhouse. The administration credited me for getting them on the right track. At a luncheon in my honor, they vowed to press on. They said nice things, but these things rang hollow in my head because I knew the music department faculty resented the direct attention I gave to black music. My black music history class was a very popular course, and I was a celebrated professor. They were also jealous of my talent, immense music background, and high musical standing in the city. I ignored their attitude for most of the past 15 years and went about doing what I had to do, evening the playing field for black music and black musicians. Because I chaired the music department, they had little power to control what direction I took the department. It became more and more obvious that these people felt threatened by their own ignorance. They were uncomfortable having a black woman overseeing them, no matter how highly regarded I was in Erie and beyond. These shallow people were actually overjoyed to see me go. Soon they could run the music department in their discriminatory way and wipe out the gains which had been made under my directorship. Be that as it may, I was in an all-systems-go mode, hoping to formulate something in the not-so-distant future which would change the way music is taught, learned, and assessed. Somehow I knew retiring was necessary for me in order to walk a new path. I was now free to begin an essential journey into the unknown. I celebrated wholeheartedly with my family as well. Even though I saw the twins several times a year, it was hard to believe my grandchildren were 11 years old. They knew their grandmother was a well-known singer-musician, and their grandfather was a highly regarded man in the medical field, but were too young to understand what all that meant. I think they thought their grandparents were frequently on the go, so they tried to stick close to us whenever possible. Needless to say, I tried to give them quality time at important times, such as the school play in which they played the lead characters, Hansel and Gretel. They were good little actors. One day when Andrew and I visited them in Cleveland Heights, we took them to a matinee production of Jack and the Beanstalk at the Heights Children's Theater. Frida and Freddie were absolutely entranced by the production and asked if they could audition to be in the children's theater. I consulted with Ojo, who readily wanted them to get involved with the theater. That was the beginning of my grandchildren's paths to theatrical pursuits. Earlier in 2009, I had spoken to Phil about designing a musical arts complex. My idea was to create a campus not affiliated with any academic school or organization, which would enable those with music talent and music interests to learn, be enlightened, and experience music without the constraints of a prescribed academic curriculum. I envisioned a music environment not governed by the assumption that classical music was superior to all other music and where Western Europe was not the center of the cultural universe. I needed the building to be round like the earth, with specialty fields housed in units called spheres, which would connect to each other and meet in the center for performances, and think-ins, a non-threatening term for a semester symposium, forum, or class. Think-ins would be scheduled sessions where anyone in attendance could have input in the discussion. However, there would be a moderator called the enabler who would oversee the discussions, steer the dialogue, and make sure everyone in attendance had a chance to speak. Emphasis would be on the sharing of information about performance practices of all genres of music around the globe, forming a sort of cross-pollination of musical concepts, viewpoints, music theory, and global music history. Testing would not be necessary because the proof of the think-in effectiveness would result in the actual presentation of the subject. Therefore, that space should be a type of theater in the round, whereby performers and audience could interact when needed. The complex would be called the Universal Musical Arts Colony, a hub for experiencing and performing music. Phil was very interested in creating a building which would represent my vision and objectives of a holistic music and arts platform. He said he saw the building representing planet Earth, with smaller planets or spheres surrounding the planet, as they actually swirl around and mingle with other planets. He immediately started drawing loops and spirals converging upon and embracing each other, thus enabling musicians to learn from each other and perform with each other. He took his drawings to Mr. Yoel Adler, the same man who sponsored his wedding. This wealthy man had insight and artistic awareness. He understood what I wanted, and after only 2 meetings, decided to take on the mammoth project and build it. I could not believe my dream was about to come true. An outstanding location was chosen, not far from the interstate highway, but close enough to public transportation to accommodate those without cars. It would definitely stand out as a unique and unrivaled, one-of-a-kind structure. Its very appearance would make the whole world take notice. It took 2 years to complete the connected spheres. The finished complex was an artistic masterpiece. Phil catapulted onto the top tier of building designers, although he never considered himself an architect. Everything was completed except the 10 living quarters called pods, which were being built behind the training and rehearsal units. They were expected to be completed by September 2013. This would allow participants to live on the grounds for extended periods of time, a month, half semester, or a full semester, according to the type of involvement their project or learning experience required. The grand opening in September 2012 was an instant and overwhelming success. Musicians of all kinds were invited to enter into this de resistance. Every registered trainee apprentice was called a participant. All hired tutors and guest performers were called guides. Module 1 was comprised of participants aged 11 through 17. Module 2 was comprised of participants aged 18 through 26. The office was open from 12 to 5 daily and Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and closed on Sunday. Action sessions. time when distinguished guides tutored our highest level participants ran from 1 to 3 p.m. daily. The high activity time was after school, 4 to 7 p.m. Saturdays were filled from 10 a.m. through 5 p.m. Sundays were used for special matinee performances only. The low study fee to be paid up front allowed us to compensate the hired tutors and guest performers. We were also supplemented with a longed-for family grant to cover the expense of running such a sizable establishment. Classical pianists marveled at the way jazz pianists got over the keyboard with such ease and accuracy. They asked how jazz pianists knew what to play. Obviously, classical pianists learned a lot more from jazz pianists than they ever thought possible. Classical pianists did not have a sense of harmonic structure, and jazz pianists could not see themselves practicing many hours a day perfecting something written and set in stone. However, Johann Sebastian Bach's piano compositions allowed the classical pianists to present a reason to play written music. His 2- and 3-part inventions are individual gems which all pianists love to play. Also, Claude Debussy's French impressionistic piano music appealed to jazz pianists. It was awesome watching dueling classical violinists and folk music fiddlers. Violinists played long phrases with warmth and expression, while fiddlers played lots of fast notes with panache and abandon, in sync with the rhythmic pattern. A special jewel of the colony was the Aeolian Skinner 2-manual pipe organ. It was donated to us by an eccentric man who loved pipe organs. It had been tucked away in an auditorium and unused for 5 years. He felt it would be better served if the instrument came to us. He even made sure it was restored properly after moving to the facility. I was jumping for joy because I played pipe organ and hoped this gift would spark interest in young musicians to study this mighty instrument. With that in mind, I invited some area high school music students to observe it being installed. They were quite impressed and too expressed interest in learning to play. These youths became fans of the king of instruments. I firmly believed one learns by experiencing music. Therefore, each sphere, which housed a specific area for learning and rehearsing, and where our developing and skilled players and singers interacted, my guides and enablers were given stipends instead of salaries. Hence, they came for the right reason, and not because they would have large earnings. That fact practically assured me I had the right people on board. Although not intended to be a degree-granting school, participants enrolled in a college could receive credit for their involvement over the course of a semester, along with a certificate indicating a completed semester called Fulfillment of Participation, signed by the chief advisor of the colony. I was overwrought with joy to know my vision had become a reality. As founder and chief advisor, I could set this institution in motion the way I wanted music to be cultivated. There was even an eatery building on the grounds called the Hash Hut that offered soup, salads, sandwiches, juice, tea, coffee, and its signature cookies. It was open noon to 6 daily and noon to 4 on Saturdays. Working out the contract for this establishment was an adventure for me. Needless to say, I was busy as a beaver that year, managing the amplitude of the music compound. Famous classical, jazz, and folk singers, pianists, and instrumentalists asked to be guest performers and think-in guides. It was truly something to watch an African master drummer and a symphony orchestra percussionist exchanging music ideas and understanding. My investigation into the history of vocal sounds or singing by way of studying contometrics, which is the analysis of global singing styles, elevated the vocal sector. Jazz, folk, and opera singers tried singing each other's repertoire and discussed the way they each used their voices or singing techniques when singing a musical phrase or interpreting the text. Sometimes there were piano playing battles where jazz and classical pianists went head to head, or maybe I should say hand to hand. Before and after every performance, there would be an open round table think-in session to wade through the presentation, not as critics, but as a means of learning from the production. Small portions might even be repeated to pinpoint a point of discussion. Such in-depth probing would bring about amazing insight and familiarity. It is a sure-fired, exciting way to learn music theory and music history without having individual classes. The final presentation would have participants and guides performing side by side. Some colleges and universities had academic versions somewhat similar to this approach, which they called integrative or interdisciplinary studies. However, they are bound by graduation requirements. At my music colony, people became proficient in music without the pressure of grades. They willingly allowed themselves to be musically illuminated. So many young musicians from out of state showed up until we needed more pods to accommodate them. Again, Mr. Adler stepped up to the plate and agreed to construct 5 more pods to be ready in 2014. We had reached the end of our property line, so that would be it for housing. Although we covered many aspects of the compound, one necessary component, a music library reading room, was next on my list of must-haves. I looked into the feasibility of having a custom-made permanent yurt to house the book and music repository. After regular daily hours, it could be used as a meeting space for discussions. Inasmuch as the entire design of the compound fit into a round spherical category, a yurt would harmonize with the theme while having its own distinct flavor. Since it was not costly and would be fairly simple to put together, Mr. Adler gave the okay to begin framing it. The yurt project was to begin in April and was scheduled for completion by June, thus having enough time to collect books, music, and recordings to fill the shelves. By 2013, things were humming along very well. The music colony captured the attention of musicians nationally and internationally. I had my hands full and loved every minute. Andrew helped on the sidelines, but left the hard stuff up to me. From time to time, I hired Philip as a guide. He had retired from active playing, but still played the clarinet beautifully and helped aspiring clarinetists. In fact, I had a roster of retired musicians who were ready, willing, and able to be active guides. I realized retired musicians were super-duper folks who embodied the type of musician I needed to motivate the young upstarts. In like manner, I used Ursula as my main consultant for setting up the music library. The facility was open year-round, with timeouts in June and August. July was Youth Music Camp Month for youngsters 7 to 10 years of age. These hand-picked youths were in high spirits, eager to learn, and soaked up as much as they could. All camp kids were called trainees. Their final concert was always a spectacular event. The colony became a household name for aspiring musicians and challenged conventional thinking concerning the way music is disseminated and absorbed. The next few years proved to be a valuable esprit de corps for progressive-minded musicians. I woke up feeling weary and worn out on July 18, 2017, Andrew's 77th birthday. I forced myself to get a move on because I had to drive to Willoughby, Ohio in Northeast Ohio, not very far from Erie, to attend a meeting with officials from various music organizations. The topic of discussion would be the state of music at all levels in our country, how we govern the standards, expectations, and principles of the study of music. Although I felt sluggish, I needed to be sharp and on the ball to take on this very conservative, stodgy group. This colloquy was very important because I would be able to speak about the success of my music campus. I hope some of these people would grasp the essence of the colony enough to try aspects of my system and philosophy and insert innovative ways of learning music as well as expanding the content of typical class offerings. The meeting was from 9 to 1, giving me enough time to drive back home and have birthday dinner with my husband, children, and 19-year-old grandchildren who were about to enter their second year at the Grimelli College in Iowa, majoring in theater, of course. I caught myself yawning from time to time because this group was dead set on continuing down the path of European-focused music. One woman had the nerve to say the problem in our schools was because of the infiltration of uncultured outsiders who cannot be taught the right and proper music for our American indoctrination. Whew! Obviously, this woman was speaking for the dominant culture who wanted the so-called uncultured folks to follow the established musical path. She was stubbornly living in the past and didn't realize she was a bigoted woman. Her point of view had to go. I pulled myself together because I had my work cut out for me. My introduction to and promotion of my point of view concerning the way in which we process and intake the information was met with polite apprehension. Therefore, when I showed proof of my highly successful system at the colony, I got a flood of questions. They had trouble believing one could digest and remember lots of specific material without tests of some sort. I reminded them that all around in-depth preparation about something which someone has great interest far surpasses a test score. Furthermore, personal interest makes the individual retain information. I emphasized that the young musicians at the colony from various ethnic backgrounds and races seem to be in high gear the majority of the time because they are constantly tuned in and turned on to their exciting, inclusive music progress. As I suspected, for the most part, the discussion was a waste of time. These people had only had the forum to say they had had a forum. Their minds were already made up, so it was an exercise in futility. Nevertheless, I think I stirred the pot enough to get a few of those traditionally minded musicians to look into the benefits of my course of action. I was happy when the whole thing ended and quickly made my way to the exit sign. I was not sure attending had been worth the effort because I was emotionally drained and bushed from being around such negativity. I rushed to my car and headed home. I yawned continuously and decided to stop at the CVS drugstore in nearby Mentor, Ohio to pick up some toothpaste, mouthwash, and eye drops. As I walked toward aisle 7, I was shocked to see Andrew standing there, looking at various items. I tipped up to him and called out his name. He turned around, abruptly looked at me, and asked how I knew his name. Thinking he was playing with me, I answered, "Because you're my husband." With a puzzled look on his face, he said, "Madam, I am not married, nor have I ever been married." The expression on his face was one I'd not seen before. I then asked him to stop fooling around. Disturbed, he said he was not fooling around and wanted to know who I was. I answered, Johanna LanYe Porter, which alarmed him because he said his name was Andrew E. Porter. All at once, seemingly out of the blue, I was able to remember the conversation I had with Ned Witherspoon, the taxi driver. At that moment, it hit me what was happening. That man was not my Andrew. Oh, this meant my husband, Andrew, must be one of those people who resides in two dimensions simultaneously, but is not aware of it at all. I immediately realized my drained, sleepy state of being had to be because of an oncoming convergence of dimensions. Only when the dimensions are close or actually touching was I able to clearly decipher what's going on in each and live in them simultaneously. But I knew my time was limited. I then asked this man if I could talk to him at the bagel store down the street. He asked why. I replied to sit and calmly explain the mix-up. He hesitated, but eventually agreed to follow me to the bagel store. I knew I needed to tell the man something which would make sense to him, so I came up with an explanation. Once inside, sitting at the booth, I told him he was the spitting image of my husband. I then asked this man if he had a twin brother. He answered me, no, not that he knew, but he had been given up shortly after birth, so there could be a twin brother. I then apologized for my behavior in the drugstore and further explained I thought my husband was pulling a prank on me. Still puzzled, the man asked why the names were the same. I said, if he is a twin, perhaps when the babies were assigned different parents, the authorities mistakenly gave both the same name. It seemed plausible, so this Andrew bought my explanation. But it didn't really matter anyway because this man would have no memory of me or this conversation when I left. This Andrew told me he never married because real love never came to him. He was convinced that at his age he would never know the joy of love, but instead he treasured the joy of caring for others and making them happy. I asked what was his line of work. Just like my Andrew, he was also a retired prosthetic specialist who lived in Erie. He said he now dabbled in house restorations, which he thoroughly enjoyed. He also volunteers at the food bank because he wants no one to be hungry. I felt sad that such a giving man was living his life all alone. He was a wonderful human being, and I wished I could help him find companionship. But under the circumstances, there was nothing I could do. At that moment, I looked out the window and saw a car exactly like mine pull into the handicapped parking space. To my total astonishment, the woman who carefully got out of the car was me. I was extremely flustered, but tried to control myself enough to not spook the Andrew sitting with me. I instantly turned my head away from facing the door and put my face in my hand. After she had passed, I peeked to make sure she was not looking in our direction. Needless to say, that was the strangest experience I ever had. Even more bizarre at that moment in time, I knew facts about her entire life. Although a very successful and admired musician, that Johanna lived alone and had given up all hope of ever having love in her life. I felt her pronounced melancholy. Then it hit me. That Johanna and this Andrew were supposed to meet. I was sent to facilitate their connection. I told this Andrew to look at the woman standing in line wearing the pretty blue blouse. He lifted his head and looked at her. Without hesitation, he said she was very attractive and wished to meet her. He was mesmerized by her. Interestingly, he never noticed she looked like me. I urged him to be brave and introduce himself to her. I began to feel sleepy again, so I knew time was of the essence. It was urgent that I return to Erie before the dimensions separated, because my consciousness was already leaning heavily toward dimension number 1. If I remained there, I would be caught in dimension number 1 forever, with no memory of my life in dimension number 3. Although I cared deeply for the Johanna here, I cared more for me in number 3 with my husband, 2 grown children, and twin grandchildren. I told this man I had to leave, but insisted he make his presence known to the lady in line because I had a strong feeling happiness was waiting for them. I got up and tugged at him. He nervously got up and walked toward her. I then said goodbye, while once more urging him to speak to the new apple of his eye. Thankfully, in only moments, he would have no memory of meeting me. Instead, he would be totally immersed in the new waters of romance. As I pulled off, he was just about to speak to her. I fought the sleepiness and was desperate to get home before the disturbance in the realm of cosmic consciousness got fully established. Just to put my mind at ease, I called Andrew on my smartphone. He answered and asked when I was coming home. I heard talking in the background and recognized AJ's voice, so I knew all was well. I told Andrew I was on my way, gave a loud phone kiss, and hung up. Luckily, I made it back unimpaired and before the full impact from the separation of the dimensions took hold. I was safe in the arms of my beloved husband, Andrew, and surrounded by my entire family, who had assembled to celebrate his birthday. Be that as it may, moments after I returned, the slide must have taken place, because my consciousness and physical presence shifted to dimension number 1, my original dimension, which had left my unfrequented consciousness incommunicado for 50 years. I found myself in line at the bagel store in Mentor, Ohio. Walking toward me was a tall, handsome, curly white-haired man wearing rimless glasses. He came up to me and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. You look incredibly familiar." I took a chance to ask if we had met before. I thought to myself, if ever I'd met you, I'd never forget you. I told him I didn't think we had met before. He then asked me to please pardon his brashness. I told him he wasn't brash at all. In fact, he was very much a gentleman in the way he approached me. He then insisted on paying for my smoothie and invited me to sit at his table. I thanked him for his generosity and accepted his invitation. Something about this man completely stupefied me. I sat not knowing what to say to him. He smiled and admitted being knocked for a loop when he noticed me. We both were captivated with each other. He told me, formally or technically, his name was Dr. Andrew Emerson Porter, but he went by Dr. A.E. Porter and was from Erie, PA. He asked me to call him Andrew. He was in the vicinity, dog-sitting for his friends Pete and Bobby Hatcher, who were on an Alaskan cruise and expected to return the next day. He then said he thought he would celebrate his birthday today with their dog, Fuzzy. He continued by saying he didn't know why he came to the bagel store, but he was happy he had come there. Likewise, I didn't know why I'd come there either, but was happy to be there. Jokingly, I said it must have been in the stars for us to meet today on his birthday. I realized I had not told him my name, so I fixed that immediately. I said, I am Dr. Johanna LanYe, but please call me Johanna. He said he was very pleased to make my acquaintance. Inside, I had never felt so glorious in my life. I did not want these moments to end. Impetuously, Andrew asked if I would celebrate his birthday with him and Fuzzy. I responded affirmatively and was overjoyed to celebrate with this man. Yet in the back of my mind, I wondered if I should do such a thing with a perfect stranger. But my instincts gave me the green light, so it was a go. I followed him to the Hatcher residence in Mentor, which was very close to my townhouse, also in Mentor. It was an attractive ranch-style house with a large yard on a winding suburban road. Fuzzy met us, wagging his tail energetically. In place of barking, he playfully sniffed and panted, indicating he wanted attention. He was a friendly, rambunctious golden retriever. I liked dogs, so we hit it off instantly. Andrew was pleased that Fuzzy liked me and commented, Fuzzy and I have a pretty new friend. Once inside the house, we sat on the couch. Andrew wanted to know more about me, and I wanted to know more about him. I asked him to look at my website, for it gave a good account of my life. He replied he had no computer and could not operate the one in his house. I then asked if he had a smartphone. He replied he still only had his trusty flip phone, which worked perfectly. Obviously, today's technology was off limits for him. Regardless, he solved the matter by suggesting we write down the highlights of our lives on a sheet of paper. He reached in his back pants pocket and pulled out a little tablet, tore out a few sheets, and handed them to me. Then, from the cute little basket on the end table, he gave me a pencil. I thought that was a good idea and a quick, meaningful, comprehensive way to get acquainted. Andrew wrote, on this day, July 18, 77 years ago, he was born somewhere in Cook County, Illinois, near Chicago. His mother dropped him off at a dwelling called the Greenleaf Orphanage when he was 3 days old. He was the misfit, the first and only black child there, and routinely harassed. He grew up in that institution and, in spite of unfair treatment, graduated salutatorian from the Greenleaf High School in 1958. He received the Chicago High School Humanitarian Award in 1958. Received a full 4-year scholarship to Northern and Western University, 1958. Graduated summa cum laude with a bachelor's degree in biomechanics, 1962. Received a master's in rehabilitative medicine and prosthetics from N&W University in 1964. Earned a doctorate in biomedical engineering, also from N&W University in 1966. Did his residency, completed the required certification testing, and began life as a prosthetic specialist at the same school. He was chosen as head of prosthetics and orthotics and director at the Erie Center for Rehabilitative Science in 1968. Retired in 2010 after 42 years of award-winning service and leadership. Hobbies included playing professional table tennis, regional champ for 30 years, cooking, house restorations, yard work, and photography. Founding member of the In-Print Book Guild of Erie. Teaches table tennis at Boys and Girls Club. Enjoys music, art, poetry, reading, films, nature, traveling, getting info on the computer in the library, watching professional basketball, ice skating, and some football. Favorite holiday is Thanksgiving. Favorite color is blue, like the sky. Mine, Red, born in Youngstown, Ohio. Mother, Odyssey LanYe, passed in 1979. Father, Jonas LanYe, passed in 1993. Half-brother Waylon Robinson passed in 1997. Had an artificial leg. Child music prodigy with perfect pitch, blessed with a mature-sounding operatic voice, played piano at age 2, violin, and organ in elementary school. Organist and choir director for the junior choir at Christ Memorial AAMU Church at age 15, and designated soprano soloist for the youth Sunday school division of the 4th Registered AAMU District, under the jurisdiction of Bishop Stephen Gilbert Scottsdale. Youngest soprano soloist at age 16 with the Youngstown Civic Philharmonic Choristers and the Barden Choral Society. Graduated from high school and accepted a scholarship to the Cleveland Conservatory of Musical Studies in Cleveland, Ohio, 1962. Sang with the Cleveland Symphonic Choir under Robert Shaw, 1964-1966. National Phi Mu Epsilon Scholarship to the Colorado Rockies Classical Music Festival in Aspen, 1965. Graduated from the Cleveland Conservatory with a bachelor's degree in voice, 1966. Fellowship to the Music Festival of the Berkshires. Sang soloed with the Boston Philharmonic Symphony, 1966-68. Scholarship to the New England College of Musical Arts in Boston, 1966-68. Graduated from the New England College of Musical Arts with a master's degree in voice, 1968. Sang with the Upstate New York Opera Company, 1968-70. Was a full-time voice faculty member at Rogers University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, beginning in 1970 and retired in 2008, 38 years later. Received a Doctor of Musical Performance degree, DMP, in voice from the London City University of Ontario in 1976. Sang with the Ontario Opera Troupe 1972-1992. Composed operas, piano works, choral works, and was frequent guest orchestral and choral conductor at music conferences. Played jazz piano at Canadian jazz festivals. Returned to the United States in 2008. Formed a youth opera company called Opera Joy in 2009. Created the National Negro Spirituals Voice Competition for college-age students in 2009. Hobbies are reading, research, traveling, and playing word games. My favorite colors are earth tones. It took 30 to 40 minutes to think and write down all that information. But after reading the sheets of paper, we had a much better idea about us and were enormously impressed with each other's accomplishments. I asked Andrew about growing up in an orphanage and was given an overview of that experience. He confessed that being an orphan was difficult because of his alienation from other children due to being the only black child and the oldest child in the facility. He was better able to interact with other youths on Saturday when he was allowed to go to the YMCA and play table tennis. He also met his first black buddy at the Y. He did not see himself growing up at the orphanage. He saw himself surviving and eventually escaping an oppressive environment. Andrew figured that helping others was the only way he could endure life. He looked for any way or anything to solve a problem in someone's life. In the 9th grade, he made his first orthotic brace, a crude-looking, handmade ankle stabilizer for one of the boys in his class. He merely glued some popsicle sticks together, put cotton all over them, and wrapped gauze from the nurse's office around the boy's ankle. It worked, and furthermore, he had made a friend. That is why being a leader in the field of prosthetics helped him cope with personal issues. Many people have told him they would not have survived had he not been there for them. The care with which Andrew took to design an artificial limb gave him a reason to live. For 42 years, this man gave his all to many, many people. Found it hard to believe This strikingly handsome guy had not had a special loving relationship with somebody in all these years. He seemed too good to be true. So I suggested we write things about ourselves we did not like and things that annoyed us. Andrew wrote he did not like himself when he sinks into a grand funk. He equated it to hopping on the pity train. Similarly, he sometimes struggled to refrain from comparing his life to other lives and not being grateful for the life he had. People who lied annoyed him, and people who manipulated others really aggravated him. I had been sitting and thinking about what to write when he began reading his writings. After hearing it, I told him, ditto for me. He commented, how could two such successful, talented, accomplished people agonize over life? I answered, because we have walked this earth alone for so long. We have no one with whom we can converse on a regular basis, and no one who cares about us personally. I thought sure he would tell about being engaged or that he lived with someone at one time, or perhaps he was gay. But nothing like that was revealed. Generic sentiment goes only so far. We are missing the number one element needed for human sustenance. Andrew said the word love. I replied, yes, love. I startled myself when I blurted out that word and thought I destroyed any chance I might have with Andrew. I was scared beyond belief because I had real feelings for this man. He looked at me and said softly, I love you, Johanna. He continued, I know we just met, but I am truly in love with you. In fact, I loved you the moment I saw you. I was brought to a grinding halt. He had said what had he said what I thought he said? My reaction made him give me a stern tongue lashing. He said, my lady, I have lived over 3/4 of a century and have never before experienced the feeling deep down in my stomach that suggests the emotion and passion associated with real love. I am not imagining this feeling, nor am I blowing it out of proportion. I am in love with you. He continued, I fully understand your skepticism, because men pressure women routinely to go along with certain boorish intentions to satisfy their lustful hunger. These males make it difficult for a man like me to express true love. Throughout my entire adult life, I have bucked the social pressures of dating because I saw no reason to go out with someone just to see if I liked her. My rule was, I would go out with the woman for whom I have feelings and hope she has feelings for me. I never wanted to waste time using some kind of check-off list to see if we were compatible. Compatibility does not necessarily bring about love or add up to love. The times I went out with ladies were only casual and always with the group. The only exceptions were a few times I would accompany a lady to an event, serving as her attendant or right-hand person. Otherwise, I was always uncomfortable around females because I did not want any woman to think I had ulterior motives. I hated the societal pressure put on men to impose their lascivious, smutty course of action upon women. I hated listening to males bragging about their conquests as if that made them real men, when it really only made them barbarians. Yes, Johanna, I am different. I am not playing some sort of wretched game. It has taken me 50 years to find you. I know in my heart I truly love you, my dear one. I responded by saying, I never thought I would hear any man express his thoughts so emphatically, let alone have his thoughts be directly related to his feelings of love for me. Continuing, I told him I was a failure my entire adult life when it came to personal and quasi-amorous connections. I was always on guard when I was out, waiting for the move to try to lure me into some carnal ambush. I had minimal attraction to the majority of those people, and some had no appeal to me whatsoever. The awful truth be told, I went out with many, but never enjoyed a single date in my whole life, because it seemed every unmarried person has dated at some time in their lives. I tolerated a custom I found to be utterly moronic. At this stage in my life, being older, slightly handicapped, walking with a limp due to hip surgery in 2016, and totally disinterested in matters of the flesh, I ruled out any chance of ever having personal love. My saying was, my ship came, sailed away, and sank like the Titanic. This world doesn't value loving, caring, or nurturing. I told myself I'm out of step with society, so stop whining, wishing, and yearning for love. Instead, go about life trying to give underserved music a chance to be recognized and underserved people a chance to get in on the act. Now, out of nowhere, you, Dr. Porter, came into my life today and erased a half-century of total frustration and hopelessness. I love you so much until I feel flipped out. At long last, I have found the man of my dreams. We looked deeply into each other's eyes. I snuggled up to him on the couch. He put his arm around me and gently nudged me to a more frontal position. Then it happened. He tenderly kissed me. I never had a kiss to give me such a rush. His soft lips made me understand the Sam Cooke song, You Send Me, because he sent me to the clouds. Andrew sighed, looked at his watch, and said, Love walked in and captured us an hour and a half ago. Johanna, you're the best birthday gift I ever received. We sat quietly, savoring the flavor of the moment. Then Andrew expressed his desire to cook dinner for us. I gave him thumbs up on this desire, but made sure he knew I did not cook. He liked the fact I didn't cook because he could showcase his meal. Also, he said, 2 cooks in the kitchen is too many. He got up, pulled me up from the couch, escorted me to the kitchen, and sat me in the stool at the large island in the middle of the nicely arranged room. I watched him put together a wonderful meal of salmon patties, potato pancakes, and steamed veggies. He even whipped up a cake from a cake mix box. As he worked, he smiled at me periodically and threw kisses. All that took only an hour, and we were ready to eat. We ate at the kitchen table adjacent to the island. The meal was delicious. He popped open a bottle of champagne, which he took from the wine fridge. He brought it, thinking it would be used the next day when Pete and Bobby returned. Just before we were about to eat the cake and drink champagne, I got up, wrapped my arms around him from behind, and sang the Stevie Wonder song, Happy Birthday, to him, which he highly enjoyed. Then Andrew got a serious look on his face, looked into my eyes, and asked me to marry him. He explained it this way. He was 77 years old, and I was 73. We did not have the luxury of time on our side, so we should not waste another day being without each other. I froze and stared at him in disbelief, unable to speak. He patiently waited for my answer. It felt like I was on a runaway carousel because my head was spinning so fast. I kept asking myself, is this really happening to me? Finally, the word yes softly came out of my mouth. He asked me to please say it louder, and I did. I said yes, 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 with gaiety, vibrancy, and oomph. Like the song says, what a difference a day makes. 24 little hours. Brought the sun and the flowers where there used to be rain. My yesterday was blue, dear. Today I'm part of you, dear. My lonely nights are through, dear, since you said you were mine. What a difference a day makes. There's a rainbow before me. Skies above can't be stormy. Since that moment of bliss, that thrilling kiss, it's heaven when you find romance on your menu. What a difference a day makes. And the difference is you. Andrew was in high gear, intensely looking at me and putting both hands on my shoulders. He said, "Let's fly to Las Vegas tomorrow and get married." Excitedly, I said, "Okay." I smiled so much until my cheeks hurt. Then I realized it was nearly 10 o'clock, so I needed to go home and get to bed in order to be ready for our journey into matrimony. Andrew said he would take care of all the details concerning our flight and hotel. Pete and Bobby, spelled B-O-B-B-I, were staying overnight in Strongsville near the Cleveland airport, visiting close friends whose child recently had spinal fusion surgery for severe scoliosis. They would leave about 7 a.m. and get home by 8:15 to 8:30 a.m. Andrew would then come to my house and take me back to their house to meet them. Of course, I should be packed and ready for this upcoming amazing adventure. Andrew and I hugged and kissed once more before I got in my car. He said he'd call in the morning before coming to pick me up. When I got home, I didn't know what had happened. I pinched myself to make sure I was alive. I also looked in the bathroom mirror to see if I saw my reflection. Everything checked out okay. In one day, I really met the man of my dreams and will marry him as soon as possible in Las Vegas. It all seems surreal because until now, romantic occurrences happened to others, not to me. When I awakened the next morning, I made myself believe, like the song states from the musical The Wiz, if you believe within your heart, you'll know that no one can change the path that you must go. Believe what you feel and know you're right, because the time will come around when you'll say it's yours. I limped around my house believing a wonderful man had fallen in love with me. Tears flowed from my eyes because I had never felt happiness like this before. It was 8:50 a.m. when my cell phone rang. My heart pounded. I answered and heard Andrew say, "Good morning, my love. I miss you so much." I told him I missed him too and was ready to go. I gave him directions to my house and said I'd be waiting with bated breath. He arrived at 9:10 a.m. I quickly got in his car. He kissed me and then gave me our schedule. Number 1, I'd meet Bobby and Pete. Number 2, we would head for the Cleveland airport at 9:40. Number 3, check in around 11:45. 4, board the plane at 2 p.m. 5, leave Cleveland at 2:25 Eastern Time. 6, arrive in Chicago at 2:35 Central Time. 7, leave Chicago at 3:15 p.m. 8, arrive in Las Vegas at 5 Pacific Time. I was impressed how he had arranged everything in such a short span of time. He was a man about business. Everything went according to schedule. I found myself sitting on the plane next to the man I loved. We held hands all the way to Chicago. The change of planes took place swiftly, and we were off again, headed to Las Vegas. After partaking of the meal on the plane, both of us took a snooze, for we were bushed from all the excitement we encountered over the past 24 hours. I laid my head on Andrew's shoulder, and he put his arm around me. We slept the entire way to Vegas. When we arrived, we both felt sluggish and disoriented. However, that all faded away as soon as we saw the bright lights of Vegas shining in the distance. Neither of us had ever been to this famous city. Thus, we were surprised just how close the airport was to the town itself. When we got off the plane, we were in Wonderland. People were everywhere, and excitement flowed freely. We hailed a taxi to take us directly to the marriage bureau. There we got our marriage license. Next, we went to the jewelry shop to get rings. Finally, it was on to the Little Vegas Chapel. Everything was set up to make things as easy as possible. We selected the basic wedding, which provides a minister, a witness, a photo, and the official wedding administrator. Before we knew it, we were married. Whew! I am sure no couple has ever met one day and married the next day. We set a record, for sure, especially since we were over 70 years of age. Frankly, Andrew and I carried forth our express romance and wedding without a hitch. Once outside the chapel, the luster of the city glistened as nightfall was upon us. We took a horse carriage tour. I'd never seen a sparkling city before, but this place shimmered. Andrew pointed to the many, many buildings which were hotels but looked like palaces. Outside shows were going on at some of the hotels. Activities of all kinds were happening everywhere. On our potty break at the Desert Gatehouse Hotel, I noticed slot machines were in every nook and cranny, including the bathrooms. Although the Vegas world was lively, my new husband and I needed to check in to a hotel and settle in for the night. We selected the Viva Las Vegas Hotel just off the Strip a tad. It looked like a gigantic golden V. Andrew chose the wedding suite for us. It was a plush chamber. Suddenly I got nervous because I was going to change into my nightie and get in bed with a man I'd known only about 30 hours. Well, I thought, 3 cheers for me. I'm married to this fabulous man, and I can't wait to snuggle up to him in this sumptuous bed for our first night together. Actually, I think both of us were a little shy, for we changed in the privacy of the bathroom. Well, at last, we were in bed. Andrew said he had never been this happy in his life. Often he fantasized about being in love, but that was it. Now indisputably in love with me, the reality far outdistanced any fantasy. Being accustomed to sleeping on my stomach, I took that position. I then nuzzled up to him, positioned my legs over his, and put my arm over his torso. He whispered, "My dear wife, Your soft body feels so good. He put his arm over me and secured me in that position. I could feel his rapid heartbeat, which was in sync with mine. I inched up and kissed his neck. He moved a little to be able to massage my back. What a magnificent touch he had. He stroked my arms and put his hand in mine. I was floating. He then asked if I was comfortable, and I answered yes. At that moment, I realized I had reached Shangri-La. Nothing had ever been as perfect as this. I gave thanks for allowing me to have this opportunity for love. We easily fell asleep. The next morning we had breakfast in bed and began discussing our living arrangements. Andrew told me he owned his cottage, and if I wanted to move in with him, he would be overjoyed. But he did not want me to think I had to do what he wanted me to do. Therefore, if I preferred to make other arrangements, it was fine with him. I asked the size of his cottage. He said it had 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a good-sized living room, a medium-small dining room, an L-shaped kitchen, a large finished basement, plus a 1-car garage. He had lived there ever since he came to Erie. Needless to say, it sounded like a fine bachelor pad. Meanwhile, I noted since we had lived our lives as single people, our residences reflected that status. My townhouse suits me to the T, but now I want to live with my husband. Maybe we should investigate purchasing a slightly larger house which could accommodate all our furniture and belongings. This new abode would represent our new life as a married couple. He agreed wholeheartedly. At the very same time, we asked, where should we live? Andrew thought perhaps a new location might fit the bill. I told him he was right. I recommended Sedona, Arizona, a town I liked when I visited a few years ago. It is a place loaded with beautiful scenery and artistic people. Andrew said he'd heard positive things about it. After that conversation, we decided to take in the happenings in Vegas and enjoy our honeymoon. I put my arm in his and stepped forth toward the dawn of a new day. No one knows what lies ahead or whence cometh anything at all. But I feel certain I will keep going, poised and ready to take the rein and ride into life's tomorrows.